Throughout history, the shadows of our world have been home to sinister and inhumane projects, operations so dark and twisted that they defy belief. When whispers of these deeds reached the public, the media and population often dismissed them as mere conspiracy theories, the wild imaginings of overactive minds. But then, the unimaginable happened. The truth came out. These were not the fantasies of the paranoid. These were real events, hidden behind layers of secrecy and deceit. Today, we're going to dive into some of the craziest conspiracy theories that turned out to be nothing but the cold, hard truth. So let's get into it. What if I told you the US government once planned to stage terrorist attacks on its own soil? Yeah, that's right. Fake bombings, hijacked planes, innocent lives caught in the crossfire, all to justify a war. This ain't some wild conspiracy theory. This is Operation Northwoods, a plan so shocking it'll make you question everything you thought you knew. Now let's set the stage. It's the Cold War, a time of paranoia, fear, and a desperate desire to contain communism. The Bay of Pigs invasion has failed, the Cuban Missile Crisis has the world on edge, and Cuba, under Castro, is a thorn in Uncle Sam's side. The U.S. has tried everything to take down Castro: assassination plots, invasion attempts, economic warfare. But Castro's a slippery fish, and the U.S. is getting desperate. Enter Operation Northwoods, a proposed plan by the U.S. Department of Defense to stage false flag terrorist attacks as a pretext for military intervention in Cuba. Imagine American planes filled with passengers taken over by Cuban terrorists, bombings in U.S. cities, attacks on military bases, all staged to make it look like Cuba's the bad guy. Meet General Lyman Lemnitzer, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. A military man, a strategist, the brains behind this audacious plan. But he's not alone. He's got the backing of the Joint Chiefs, all willing to deceive their own people to achieve their goal. Now picture the scene. The plan's laid out, the details are debated, the tension's thick. In the room, men in uniform, faces etched with determination, minds focused on the goal. And at the head of the table, JFK, the President of the United States, the man with the final say. He's faced with a choice, a moral dilemma that tests his very soul. Approve the plan, deceive the American people, justify a war. Or stand his ground, reject the deception, do what's right. He says no. He rejects the plan, stands up to the military, puts an end to Operation Northwoods. Lemnitzer's out as chairman, his career tainted, and the message is clear. There are lines that cannot be crossed. But the story doesn't end there. Operation Northwoods is buried, classified, hidden from the public eye. It becomes a shadow, a dark chapter in history, a reminder of what can happen when power goes unchecked. Fast forward to the 90s. The Cold War's over, the world's changing, and secrets are starting to creep out. Operation Northwoods is declassified and the public's shocked. The revelation shakes the foundation of trust, leads to questions, debates, soul-searching. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truths about power, deception, and the choices made in the name of national security. And the repercussions, they linger, they resonate, they shape the way we see history, the way we understand the decisions made, the lines crossed, the values compromised. It's a lesson for today, a warning for tomorrow, a story that reminds us that the past ain't always what it seems, and that the choices of yesterday shape the world of today. So there you have it, my friend. Operation Northwoods, a tale of intrigue, audacity, and moral courage. A story that takes you behind the scenes, into the corridors of power, and into the hearts and minds of those who made history. What if I told you that the very essence of life, the building blocks of our existence, were being tampered with, not by some mad scientist in a hidden lab, but by our very own government? What if I told you that the remains of innocent souls were used in experiments that would send chills down your spine? So what the hell is Project Sunshine? Let's dive deep into this dark abyss. Project Sunshine was a covert operation initiated by the US government in the 1950s. The objective? To understand the impact of radioactive fallout on the human population. Sounds scientific, right? But here's the kicker. They used the bones of deceased infants to conduct these tests. Yeah, you heard that right. They were literally playing with the remains of the dead. But why should you care? Why should this old government project matter to you? Well, let me tell you, Project Sunshine is a grim chapter in our history. It's a tale that showcases the lengths the government would go to, all in the name of science and national security. It's a narrative of deception, violation, and a complete disregard for ethics. And the worst part, the families of these infants never even knew. So, where did this macabre tale begin? The atomic age. Post-World War II, the world was obsessed with nuclear power. Atomic bomb tests were the norm, and with these tests came radioactive fallout. The US, always wanting to be a step ahead, wanted to gauge the implications of this fallout. Enter Project Sunshine. The government thought, if we're going to understand fallout, we need to study its impact on humans. And what better way than to study the bones of the recently deceased, especially infants, as their bones would give the most accurate measure of recent radioactive exposure. Now, who's the mastermind behind this horror show? The US government, with its vast resources and reach, spearheaded this project. They collaborated with scientists and researchers, ensuring that the operation remained under wraps. What were they looking for? Strontium-90, Senior-90, a radioactive isotope produced by nuclear fission. This isotope, when ingested, gets absorbed by the bones. By analyzing the bones of deceased infants, they could determine the levels of Senior-90, giving them insights into the effects of nuclear fallout on the human body. Let's delve into the sinister methods of Project Sunshine. First, there was the procurement of the bones. In many instances, the remains of infants were acquired without the knowledge or consent of their grieving families. This operation wasn't limited to the US. It spanned several countries, including the UK and Australia. Imagine the heartbreak of these families if they ever found out. Next, the analysis. Scientists would meticulously study these bones, measuring the levels of Senior-90. The results? Well, they did find traces of the isotope, but at what cost? The ethical boundaries they crossed are unimaginable. But here's where things get even murkier. In the mid-1990s, the veil of secrecy around Project Sunshine began to lift. A presidential advisory committee on human radiation experiments, set up by President Bill Clinton, released classified documents. These documents painted a grim picture. They revealed that the scientists and officials involved in Project Sunshine were acutely aware of the ethical quagmire they were in. The fallout from these revelations was immense. The public was aghast. The very thought that their government, which was supposed to protect them, could commit such heinous acts was unfathomable. It was a stark reminder of the depths to which those in power could sink in the name of research and national interest. The aftermath? A wave of outrage, calls for transparency, and demands for accountability. The government had to face the music. They had to answer for their actions, for the trust they had broken, and for the lives they had used as mere tools. In conclusion, Project Sunshine stands as a testament to the dark side of power and science. It's a story that should never be forgotten, a grim reminder of the importance of ethics, transparency, and accountability. It's a chapter in our history that we must remember, not just as a tale of horror, but as a lesson for the future. Ever heard of the heart attack gun? Sounds like something straight out of a James Bond movie, right? Well, let me break it down for you. This thing is real, and it's a dark and twisted tale that's going to make you question everything you thought you knew about the government and its secret operations. So, what the hell is the heart attack gun? Well, it's this weapon that was supposedly developed by the CIA back in the 60s and 70s. I mean, can you believe that? A gun that could cause a heart attack? Sounds insane, right? But here's the kicker. It's true. This thing actually existed, and it's a story that's going to make your head spin. Now let's dive into the nitty-gritty of this crazy tale. The heart attack gun was a part of the CIA's arsenal during the Cold War. You know, that big showdown between the US and the Soviet Union? Yeah, that's the one. Both sides were scared out of their minds of each other, and they were willing to do anything to get the upper hand. And when I say anything, I mean anything. The CIA was experimenting with all sorts of wild stuff back then. We're talking about mind control, drugs, and yes, even weapons that could cause a heart attack. The heart attack gun was one of those weapons. It was designed to be a covert assassination tool, something that could take out a target without leaving a trace. I mean, think about it. A heart attack? That's something that could happen to anyone, right? So who would suspect foul play? The gun itself was a modified pistol that fired a dart. But this wasn't just any dart. This thing was filled with a toxin called shellfish toxin. When it hit the target, it would cause a heart attack within seconds. And the best part? The dart would dissolve, leaving no trace behind. I mean, can you imagine the power that gave the CIA? They could take out anyone they wanted and no one would be the wiser. But here's where things get really twisted. The heart attack gun wasn't just some wild conspiracy theory. It was real, and it was revealed to the public during the Church Committee hearings in 1975. That's right, the government had to come clean about this thing, and it sent shockwaves through the nation. So why does this matter? Why should you give a damn about some old government weapon? Well, let me tell you, the heart attack gun is a big deal. It's a dark and twisted chapter in American history that shows just how far the government was willing to go in the name of national security. It's a story of abuse, manipulation, and a complete disregard for human rights. And guess what? Some of the stuff they were doing might still be going on today. What if I told you that amidst the chaos of World War II, there was a plot so sinister, so audacious, that it would make your skin crawl? What if I told you that Japan, one of the Axis powers, had devised a plan to unleash a biological nightmare on American soil? A plan that involved the deadliest of diseases, the plague, and a covert operation under the cover of night. So what the hell is Operation Cherry Blossoms at Night? Let's unravel this dark tapestry. Operation Cherry Blossoms at Night, also known as Operation PX, was a meticulously crafted Japanese military strategy during World War II. The objective? To launch a biological attack on civilians in the United States. And not just any attack, but one that would utilize the deadly plague as its weapon of choice. Sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, right? But why should this matter to you? Why should you care about a plan from decades ago? Because, my friend, this operation is a stark reminder of the lengths nations would go to during wartime. It's a chilling testament to the depths of human ingenuity when it comes to devising ways to harm one another. It's a narrative of deception, ambition, and a complete disregard for human life. So where did this nefarious plan originate? The roots of Operation Cherry Blossoms at Night can be traced back to Japan's actions during the Second Sino-Japanese War. The Japanese had already dabbled in the dark arts of biological warfare, dropping bombs filled with plague-infested fleas and flour on Chinese military members and civilians. This was just a precursor, a testing ground for what they had in store for the U.S. The U.S. had already inflicted significant damage on Japan, with the firebombing of Japanese cities leading to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Japanese civilians. Japan, in its quest for retaliation and dominance, sought to strike at the heart of America. And what better way than to use a weapon that wouldn't just kill, but would spread fear and chaos? The plan was audacious. Japan intended to use aircraft launched from their I-400 class submarines to drop bombs on cities in Southern California. But these weren't your typical bombs. These were containers filled with plague-infested fleas, designed to spread the disease rapidly among the population. Imagine the horror. A beautiful night in Southern California with families at home, unaware of the impending doom. And then, under the cover of darkness, Japanese aircrafts released their deadly cargo. Within days, the plague would spread, causing untold deaths and throwing the region into chaos. But who were the minds behind this horror show? The Japanese military, with its vast resources and determination, was the driving force. They collaborated with scientists and researchers, ensuring that the operation was ready for execution. However, as with many things in war, plans don't always come to fruition. Operation Cherry Blossoms at Night never saw the light of day. The war ended before the operation could be executed. But the mere existence of such a plan, the very thought that it was even considered, is chilling. So, how did the world come to know about this dark chapter? Decades after the war, classified documents and investigations brought the truth to light. The revelations were shocking, to say the least. The world was aghast at the audacity of the plan and the potential consequences had it been carried out. In conclusion, Operation Cherry Blossoms at Night stands as a grim reminder of the horrors of war. It's a testament to the lengths nations will go to achieve victory, even if it means crossing ethical boundaries. It's a chapter in history that should never be forgotten, serving as a cautionary tale for future generations. The Katyn Massacre, a dark and twisted tale from the annals of World War II. This is a story that's not just about a massacre, but about truth, courage, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of justice by the Polish government in exile. Buckle up, because this is a tale that's going to take you on a wild ride through the darkest corners of human history. Let's kick things off with the massacre itself. It's 1940, and the Soviet Union's got thousands of Polish officers, intellectuals, and other POWs locked up in camps. These aren't just any prisoners. These are the cream of the crop, the best and brightest of Poland. And what does Stalin decide to do with them? He orders them executed, all 22,000 of them, shot in the back of the head and buried in mass graves in the Katyn forest. Why? Because Stalin's playing a long game here. He wants Poland under his thumb, and these officers represent the backbone of potential resistance. Wipe them out, and you cripple Poland's ability to rise again. Now, let's talk about the Polish government in exile. These guys are the real heroes of this story. When Poland fell to the Nazis and the Soviets, the legitimate Polish government fled to London. They're sitting there watching their country get torn apart, and they're not just going to take it lying down. They hear whispers, rumors about what happened to their officers. They start to investigate, and the evidence starts to pile up. They know what happened, and they're not afraid to say it. But here's where things get real twisted. The Polish government in exile goes to the Allies, they go to the world, and they say, "Look, the Soviets massacred our people. Here's the evidence." And what does the world do? They laugh in their faces. They call them conspiracy theorists. They dismiss them as cranks. Why? Because the Allies need the Soviet Union. They're fighting Hitler, and they can't afford to piss off Stalin, so they sweep it under the rug. They ignore the evidence. They betray the Polish government in exile, and they betray the truth. But the truth has a funny way of coming out. In 1943, the Nazis discover the mass graves. They dig them up, and they show the world. And suddenly, the Polish government in exile isn't so crazy anymore. Suddenly, the world has to face the horrifying reality of what the Soviet Union did. The Allies still try to cover it up. They still try to dismiss it. But the cat's out of the bag now. The truth is out there, and it's not going away. World War I was a time of mud, blood, and lies. Among the nastiest lies was the German corpse factory, a piece of British propaganda that claimed the Germans were boiling down human corpses to make soap and other products. It was a lie designed to demonize the enemy, to shock and horrify, and it worked. People believed it, and they were outraged. But lies have a way of coming back to bite you in the ass, don't they? When the truth came out, people were furious. They felt betrayed, and they became skeptical of anything they heard about the enemy. That skepticism didn't just vanish when the war ended, it festered, it grew, and it carried over into World War II. The final solution didn't just spring out of nowhere, it was the culmination of years of anti-Semitic propaganda, laws, and violence. The Nazis had been laying the groundwork for years, dehumanizing the Jews, stripping them of their rights, and preparing the German population for what was to come. In January 1942, top Nazi officials gathered at a villa in Wannsee, a suburb of Berlin. They were there to discuss the final solution, to put their monstrous plan into motion. They spoke in euphemisms. They talked about evacuation and resettlement. But what they were really planning was mass murder on an industrial scale. The Nazis built a network of concentration camps and death camps across Europe. Places like Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor, where human beings were reduced to numbers, where they were worked to death, starved, beaten, and gassed. These were factories of death, assembly lines of murder, where efficiency and brutality went hand in hand. But the final solution wasn't just about the camps. The Nazis also deployed special killing squads called Einsatzgruppen. These were men who went from town to town, rounding up Jews and executing them en masse. They shot men, women, and children, and they buried them in mass graves. It was murder on an unimaginable scale, and it was done with cold, methodical precision. The final solution wasn't just a German endeavor. The Nazis enlisted the help of collaborators across Europe. Local governments, police forces, and ordinary citizens who were willing to turn on their neighbors, to betray them, to send them to their deaths. It was a web of complicity that stretched across the continent, a web that ensnared millions of innocent people. The legacy of World War I's German corpse factory propaganda loomed large. People had been lied to before, and they were wary of being deceived again. The horror of the final solution was so unimaginable that many simply dismissed it as another lie, another piece of propaganda designed to demonize the enemy. The scale and brutality of the final solution were beyond anything the world had ever seen. People couldn't believe it because they couldn't comprehend it. It was a failure of imagination, a failure to grasp the depths of human depravity. The idea that a government could systematically exterminate an entire people was so far outside the realm of possibility that many simply refused to believe it. You might be wondering why the German people let this happen. Well, there are few things such as the regime created a narrative that was at odds with the reality of many Germans' experiences and beliefs. By repeatedly exposing the population to this narrative through media, they induced a state of cognitive dissonance where individuals were pressured to reconcile their beliefs with the regime's ideology. Over time, this led to a shift in attitudes and acceptance of Nazi values. To resolve the discomfort of cognitive dissonance, many individuals altered their beliefs to align with the Nazi narrative. This often meant accepting dehumanizing stereotypes, supporting discriminatory laws, and even participating in or turning a blind eye to atrocities. The need to restore internal harmony led to a gradual acceptance of ideas and behaviors that might have previously been unthinkable. The Nazi regime fostered a culture of groupthink, where opposition was silenced and removed, and conformity was rewarded. Through control of the media, they created an environment where alternative viewpoints were marginalized, and the population was pressured to conform to the Nazi ideology. This led to a loss of individual critical thinking and a willingness to accept and perpetuate the regime's values. The Nazis fostered a culture of conformity, where dissent was punished and loyalty was rewarded. They used peer pressure, social ostracization, cancel culture, and economic incentives to coerce people into compliance. Those who went along with the regime were praised and rewarded, while those who spoke against the mainstream narrative were marginalized and persecuted. The Nazi regime ruled through fear and intimidation anyone who spoke against them. The SS and Gestapo were ever present, watching, listening, ready to arrest and punish anyone who spoke out or resisted. People were afraid to question them, afraid to speak the truth, afraid to do anything but comply. Even the Allies, who had access to intelligence and evidence, were reluctant to believe the full extent of the final solution. They were fighting a war, and they were focused on defeating the Axis powers. The horror of the Holocaust was a distraction, a problem to be dealt with later. Some even feared that acknowledging the truth would fuel anti-German sentiment and hinder their war effort. Across Europe, people knew something was happening. They saw their Jewish neighbors being rounded up and deported. They heard the rumors, they saw the evidence, but many chose to look the other way. Acknowledging the truth meant acknowledging their own complicity, their own failure to act. It was easier to dismiss it as a conspiracy, to bury their heads in the sand, and to pretend that it wasn't happening. The Nazis were masters of propaganda, and they used their skills to sow doubt and confusion. They denied the existence of the death camps, they spread lies about the fate of the Jews, and they worked tirelessly to keep their monstrous plan a secret. Their propaganda machine was a well-oiled machine of deception, and it played a crucial role in fostering disbelief. In a time of war, chaos, and uncertainty, people clung to normalcy. They wanted to believe that the world was still a rational, humane place. They wanted to believe that their government, their leaders, their fellow human beings were still capable of decency. The final solution shattered that illusion, and many were simply unwilling to face that horrifying reality. As Allied forces advanced across Europe, they began to encounter the concentration and death camps. The first glimpses were shocking, beyond anything they had imagined. Emaciated prisoners, mass graves, evidence of torture and murder on an industrial scale. The soldiers who liberated the camps were faced with a horror that defied comprehension. Among the horror, there were survivors, men, women, and children who had endured the unthinkable, who had witnessed the very depths of human evil. Their stories were a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, but they were also a haunting reminder of what had been lost. The survivors were living evidence of the final solution, and their voices would become a crucial part of the historical record. The Nazis had tried to hide their crimes, but the evidence was overwhelming. The gas chambers, the crematoria, the medical experiments, the mountains of personal belongings stripped from the victims. The Allies documented everything, photographing and filming the camps, collecting testimony from survivors and perpetrators alike. It was a meticulous effort to preserve the truth, to ensure that the world would never forget. The liberation of the camps sent shockwaves around the world. The images, the stories, the sheer scale of the horror were almost too much to bear. People were outraged, horrified, and guilt-ridden. How had this happened? How had the world allowed it to happen? The liberation forced a collective reckoning, a painful examination of conscience that would shape the post-war world. The realization that so many had known, that so many had been complicit in their silence, that so many had chosen to look the other way, was a painful one. It was a realization that brought with it a collective guilt, a collective shame, a collective responsibility. The liberation of the camps and the subsequent reckoning were not just moments in history. They were lessons for humanity. Lessons about the dangers of denial, the importance of vigilance, the responsibility to seek the truth, and the moral imperative to act. They were lessons that challenged us to confront our own capacity for evil, our own willingness to ignore the suffering of others, and our own failure to uphold the values we claim to hold dear. In the aftermath of World War II, the world was a place of devastation and uncertainty. Cities lay in ruins, economies were shattered, and political landscapes were forever altered. The fear of communism was spreading like wildfire, and the race for technological superiority was on. The stakes were high, the tension palpable, and the world was watching. The end of World War II marked the beginning of a new era. The Allied victory had come at a tremendous cost, and the world was eager to rebuild. But beneath the surface, a new conflict was brewing. The ideological battle between capitalism and communism was taking center stage, and the US and the Soviet Union were emerging as the primary contenders. The United States, having emerged from the war as a global superpower, was determined to spread democracy and contain the spread of communism. The Soviet Union, on the other hand, was equally committed to expanding its ideology and influence. Both nations were locked in a battle for supremacy, and the race for technological advancement was a key front in this Cold War. The stakes were enormous. Technological superiority meant military advantage, political influence, and economic power. It was a race that neither side could afford to lose. The fear of nuclear annihilation, the desire for global dominance, and the need to prove ideological superiority were driving forces that fueled this relentless pursuit of advancement. At the helm of Operation Paperclip were key figures within the U.S. government and military. Individuals like President Harry Truman, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, and others recognized the potential value of German scientists and were instrumental in conceiving and implementing the operation. Not everyone was on board with Operation Paperclip. Some within the government and the public were vehemently opposed to the idea of recruiting former Nazis, regardless of their scientific expertise. The debates were heated, the opposition vocal, and the moral questions profound. The origins of Operation Paperclip reveal a complex and multifaceted operation driven by ambition, fear, and desperation. It was a decision that would have far-reaching implications, not only for the individuals involved, but for the nation and the world. The recruitment of former Nazis was a gamble, a risk, and a choice that would continue to resonate for decades to come. Among the recruits were key figures like Werner von Braun, the mastermind behind the V-2 rocket. Von Braun's expertise in rocketry was instrumental in the U.S. space program, but his past involvement with the Nazi regime raised ethical questions. Born in Viersitz, Germany, von Braun was a charismatic and ambitious scientist who joined the Nazi Party and became an SS officer. His work on the V-2 rocket caused the deaths of thousands, including forced laborers. Other notable figures included Kurt Debut, an SS officer who played a crucial role in launching the first U.S. satellite, and Arthur Rudolph, who worked on the Saturn V rocket but later faced scrutiny for his involvement in war crimes. While the U.S. was busy recruiting German scientists, the Soviet Union was engaged in a similar effort known as Operation Osoaviakhim. Unlike the voluntary recruitment in Operation Paperclip, the Soviets forcibly relocated thousands of German scientists and their families to work on their projects. The operation was swift, secretive, and ruthless, reflecting the Soviet Union's determination to gain technological supremacy. Comparing Operation Paperclip with Operation Osoaviakhim reveals stark differences in approach, execution, and outcomes. While the U.S. focused on voluntary recruitment and integration, the Soviets opted for forced relocation and control. The U.S. faced public scrutiny and ethical debates, while the Soviets operated with impunity. Both operations, however, were driven by the same goal: technological advancement in the face of Cold War competition. The recruitment of former Nazis was not only morally complex, but also legally challenging. U.S. laws and international agreements prohibited the employment of individuals involved in war crimes and human rights violations. To overcome these legal barriers, U.S. officials had to employ creative legal maneuvers, craft ingenious justifications, and sometimes bend or even break the rules. So where did this whole MK Ultra thing come from? Well, it's not just some random idea that popped into the CIA's head. No. This has roots, and to understand it, we've got to go back to the Cold War. The US and the Soviet Union were scared of each other. They were building nukes, spying on each other, and doing everything they could to get the upper hand. It was a game of chess, but with the fate of the world hanging in the balance. And in this high-stakes game, both sides were looking for any advantage they could get. That's where the idea of mind control comes in. The Soviets were rumored to be messing around with some mind control ideas, and the US didn't want to be left behind. So what did they do? They started their own mind control program, of course. But this wasn't just some half-baked idea. No, they were serious about this. They were pouring money into research, recruiting top scientists, and exploring every avenue they could find. And what were they after? They wanted to control people's minds. They wanted to make spies spill their secrets, turn enemy soldiers into mindless beings, and protect their own guys from being brainwashed. It was some real James Bond villain stuff, and they were serious about it. Now let's get into the real details of this tale. MK Ultra itself. First up, we've got the LSD experiments. Yeah, you heard me right, LSD? The CIA was researching LSD, and they were doing it all in the name of science. But this wasn't just some experiment. No, they were conducting serious studies, dosing people without their knowledge, giving it to prisoners, and even giving it to their own agents. And what were they after? They wanted to see if they could use LSD to break down people's minds, make them spill their secrets, or just turn them into unresponsive beings. But did it work? No, they had people reacting in all sorts of ways, having spiritual awakenings, and just having really bad experiences. It was a mixed bag, and they didn't find the mind control solution they were looking for. Next up, we've got hypnosis. Now, this might sound like some stage show trick, but the CIA was serious about it. They wanted to see if they could use hypnosis to control people's minds, make them do things they wouldn't normally do, or just wipe their memories clean. Did it work? Well, kind of. They could make people do some pretty strange stuff under hypnosis, but it wasn't the mind control superweapon they were hoping for. Still, it was some interesting stuff, and it shows just how far they were willing to go. Now let's talk about electroshock therapy. You know, zapping people's brains with electricity? That's the stuff. The CIA was all over this, and they were using it to try to wipe people's memories, break down their personalities, or just make them more suggestible. Was it effective? Well, it certainly affected people. But it wasn't the solution they were looking for. Still, it's a chilling reminder of how far they were willing to go in the name of mind control. And let's not forget about all the other drugs and chemicals they were experimenting with. We're talking about stuff like heroin, amphetamines, barbiturates, and all sorts of other substances. They were trying everything to see what would work, and they didn't care about the human cost. Imagine going to a bar, having a drink, and then waking up the next day with no memory of what happened, or worse, losing your mind. That's what was happening, and it's some seriously concerning stuff. Most of the people who were experimented on didn't even know what was happening to them. They were just pawns in a game, and they paid the price for the government's ambition and cruelty. They were dosed with drugs, hypnotized, zapped with electricity, and subjected to all sorts of other horrors. And the worst part? They didn't even know why. And let's not forget about the long-term effects. We're talking about serious mental and physical damage here. People's lives were ruined, their minds were shattered, and some of them never recovered. It's a dark and concerning tale that shows just how far the government was willing to go and how little they cared about the people they were hurting. Now, let's talk about the cover-up, because you better believe the government didn't want this getting out. First, there's the death of Dr. Frank Olson. This guy was a scientist working on the MK Ultra program, and he ended up dead under some seriously shady circumstances. Did he jump? Was he pushed? Was he murdered by the CIA because he knew too much? Who really knows? What we do know is that his family was lied to, the investigation was a sham, and the whole thing is suspicious. And then there's the destruction of documents. In the 70s, the CIA was like, oh no, we're discovered. So they officially ended MK Ultra and started shredding documents. But guess what? They didn't get it all. Some documents survived, and the truth came out anyway. It was a desperate and pathetic attempt to cover their tracks, and it showed just how guilty they were. How did this all finally come out? Well, a church committee. Named after Senator Frank Church, this was the group that started digging into the CIA's activities. They were like, hey, what is going on over there? And boy, did they find a lot. They uncovered all sorts of concerning stuff, from assassination plots to illegal wiretaps to MK Ultra. They laid it all out in a series of reports, and the public was like, wow, our government did what? It was a huge deal, and it led to all sorts of reforms and oversight. But it also showed just how far the government had gone astray, and how much they were willing to lie, cheat, and steal to keep their secrets. While the official story of MK Ultra is shocking enough, it has also given rise to a number of different possible theories. These theories delve into the shadowy world of government secrets, hidden agendas, and the ongoing fascination with mind control. Let's take a closer look at some of the most prominent related to MK Ultra. Some believe that MK Ultra never truly ended, and that it continues to this day under different names and guises. This theory is fueled by several factors. First and foremost, the destruction of MK Ultra documents by the CIA in the early 1970s has left a significant gap in our understanding of the program's full scope and activities. The order to destroy the documents came from then CIA Director Richard Helms, and it effectively erased much of the paper trail. This act of destruction has led many to question what was so damning in those documents that it warranted such drastic measures. The official end of MK Ultra was declared, and some surviving documents were later declassified. However, these documents represent only a fraction of the program's activities, leaving many to wonder what secrets remain hidden. The gaps in the official record provide fertile ground for speculation and the belief that the program's termination was merely a public relations move. Adding to this theory are the whistleblowers and insiders who have come forward over the years with claims of ongoing research into mind control and psychological manipulation. Some have alleged that the research merely shifted to other government agencies or went underground, continuing in secret and without public oversight. For example, there have been claims that research into remote viewing and psychic phenomena, conducted under projects like Stargate, had connections to the mind control research of MK Ultra. While these programs were focused on different objectives, the underlying interest in manipulating human consciousness and perception remains a common thread. The US government also had continued interest in psychological warfare, information control, and influence operations is well documented. Programs exploring these areas could easily be seen as spiritual successors to MK Ultra, applying the lessons learned in a new context and with updated techniques. Remember, MK Ultra was once dismissed as a conspiracy theory until it was proven to be true, so anything is possible. What do you think? What if I told you that the world's most powerful and influential men gathered in secret, deep in the woods, to perform mysterious rituals and make clandestine deals? What if I told you that this wasn't the plot of some thriller movie, but a real-life conspiracy that turned out to be true? The Bohemian Grove is a place that has fascinated and horrified many, a testament to the lengths the elite will go to maintain their power and influence. Let's dive deep into this twisted tale. So what's the deal with this Bohemian Grove, you ask? Well, let me break it down for you. This ain't your grandma's tea party. Nah, this is where the big boys play. We're talking former presidents, billionaires, artists, and who knows what else, all gathering in a secluded spot in California. Now, this ain't a new thing. Oh no, this has been going on since 1872. That's right, way back in the day, a bunch of journalists, artists, and musicians decided they needed a place to let loose, away from the prying eyes of the public. So they formed the Bohemian Club, and the rest, as they say, is history. But it ain't just about having a good time. Nah, this place has rules, traditions, and rituals that would make your head spin. They've got a motto and everything. Weaving spiders come not here. Sounds cool, right? But what does it mean? Well, it's a warning, a message to leave your business deals and political schemes at the door. This is a place to unwind, to be free, to be, well, bohemian. Now you might be thinking, what's the big deal? So a bunch of rich guys get together and have a party, so what? But hold on, my friend, because there's more to it than that. This ain't just about having fun. It's about influence, power, and connections. You see, the Grove is a place where deals are made, friendships are forged, and the future is shaped. It's a place where the powerful can be themselves, away from the judgment and scrutiny of the world. They can talk, they can plan, they can dream. And who knows what else they get up to. But don't get it twisted. This ain't some evil lair where the world's villains gather to plot and scheme. Or is it? The truth is, we don't really know. And that's what makes it so fascinating, so alluring, so damn intriguing. Now let's talk about the place itself. Nestled in the redwoods of Monte Rio, California, the Grove is a 3,000-acre wonderland of nature and secrecy. It's got lakes, it's got trees, it's got campsites, and it's got a big old owl statue that they worship. Yeah, you heard me right, an owl statue. But why an owl? What's the deal with that? Well, the owl is a symbol of wisdom, of knowledge, of mystery. It's a fitting mascot for a place that's all about seeking understanding and enlightenment away from the chaos and noise of the world. And let's not forget about the cremation of care ceremony. What's that, you ask? Oh, just a little ritual where they burn an effigy to symbolize the shedding of worldly cares. No big deal, right? Wrong. It's a big freaking deal, and it's just one of the many things that make Bohemian Grove a place like no other. So you want to know who goes to Bohemian Grove? Well, let me tell you, it's a list that'll blow your mind. We're talking former presidents like Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, and George H.W. Bush. We've got business tycoons, famous artists, and even some international figures. But it ain't just about the big names. Nah, there's a whole culture, a whole vibe to this place. It's like a club, a fraternity, a brotherhood of the most powerful people on the planet. And they're all there, hanging out, wearing robes, worshiping owls, and doing who knows what else. And the crazy thing? They're all in on it. They all know what's going on, and they're all part of this exclusive, secretive world. It's like Fight Club for billionaires, man. And the first rule of Bohemian Grove? You don't talk about Bohemian Grove. Now, you might be wondering, how do I get an invite to this place? Well, good luck with that, because this ain't a place you just walk into. Nah, you've got to be invited, and that invitation ain't easy to come by. You see, to get into Bohemian Grove, you've got to be somebody. You've got to have influence, power, connections. You've got to be part of the club, part of the inner circle. And even then, it ain't a guarantee. They've got a selection process, a vetting process, a whole system to make sure that only the right people get in. And once you're in for life. It's like a bond, a pact, a commitment to something bigger than yourself. But what's really going on at Bohemian Grove? What's the real deal with these gatherings? Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? You see, some people think it's all about influence, about shaping the world, about pulling the strings behind the scenes. Others think it's just a place to unwind, to let loose, to be free from the pressures of power and fame. Now here is where things get a little strange. They call it the cremation ceremony. This is where the members of Bohemian Grove gather around a massive owl statue, wearing robes, chanting and burning an effigy. Yeah, you heard me right. They burn an effigy in front of an owl. But what's it all about? What's the meaning behind it? Well, some say it's a symbolic act, a way to shed the cares and worries of the world. Others think it's something more sinister, something darker, something that connects to ancient pagan rituals and secret occult practices. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, man. There are other rituals, other ceremonies, other things that go on behind closed doors. And the more you dig, the more you uncover, the more you realize that there's something truly mysterious, truly enigmatic about this place. Now let's talk about the symbolism. The owl, the fire, the robes, the chants. What does it all mean? Well, that's where things get really murky. The owl is a symbol of wisdom, of knowledge, of mystery. It's a fitting mascot for a place that's all about seeking understanding and enlightenment. But is there more to it? Is there a hidden meaning, a secret message, a coded language that only the initiated understand? And what about the fire, the effigy, the chants? Some say it's all part of a grand ritual, a magical rite, a spiritual journey. Others think it's just a bunch of rich guys playing dress-up and having a good time. But what's the truth? What's really going on at Bohemian Grove? Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer? Well, that's something that only the members of Bohemian Grove truly know. So there you have it, a glimpse into the world of Bohemian Grove. It's a place of mystery, of intrigue, of power and influence. It's a place where the world's elite gather to unwind, to connect, to plot and scheme. But is it something more? Is it a place of dark rituals and secret agendas? Is it a place where the fate of the world is decided, where the course of history is shaped, where the destiny of humanity is forged? Well, that's something we may never know. But one thing's for sure. Bohemian Grove is a place that will continue to fascinate, to captivate, to intrigue. It's a place that will always be shrouded in mystery, always be the subject of speculation, always be a symbol of something deeper, something hidden, something unknown. And that, my friend, is what makes it so damn interesting. Whether you believe the conspiracy theories or dismiss them as mere fantasies, one thing's for sure. Bohemian Grove is a place like no other. It's a place that challenges our understanding, that defies our expectations, that makes us question what we know and what we believe. It's a place that's both real and unreal, both known and unknown, both seen and unseen. It's a place that exists on the edge of reality, on the border of the possible and the impossible, on the boundary of the known and the unknown. It's the Cold War, the battle of the century, the clash of titans, the showdown between East and West. It's democracy versus communism, capitalism versus socialism, freedom versus control. It's a war of words, a war of spies, a war of nerves. It's a chess game played on a global scale, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The world's divided, and there's a line in the sand. On one side, you've got the US and its allies, champions of democracy, freedom, and the American way. On the other side, you've got the Soviet Union and its comrades, defenders of communism, equality, and the workers' revolution. It's a battle of ideologies, a battle of wills, a battle for the soul of humanity. But it's not just words and ideas. It's bombs and missiles, tanks and planes, soldiers and spies. It's an arms race, and it's a race to the death. Who's got the biggest bomb? Who's got the fastest missile? Who's got the strongest army? It's a game of one-upmanship, and the prize is survival. And then there's the final frontier, space. Who's going to get there first? Who's going to plant their flag on the moon? Who's going to conquer the cosmos? It's a race to the stars, and it's a race for glory. It's a symbol of power, a symbol of progress, a symbol of the future. Now let's zoom in on Southeast Asia, the chessboard where the Gulf of Tonkin incident will play out. It's a region of jungles and rivers, mountains and deltas, villages and cities. It's a crossroads of cultures, a melting pot of peoples, a battleground of empires. The Gulf of Tonkin, a seemingly innocuous body of water off the coast of North Vietnam, is about to become the epicenter of a global controversy. It's a place of beauty and mystery, a place of history and destiny, a place where the fate of nations will be decided. Southeast Asia is a political powder keg with colonial legacies, nationalist movements, communist insurgencies, and capitalist ambitions. It's a region in flux, a region in turmoil, a region in search of identity. The US and Vietnam have a complicated relationship, a relationship of hope and fear, trust and betrayal, friendship and enmity. It's a dance of diplomacy, a game of geopolitics, a struggle for the soul of a nation. The US is playing a dangerous game in Vietnam, a game of containment, a game of dominoes, a game of life and death. It's a strategy of intervention, a strategy of escalation, a strategy of victory at any cost. It's August 2nd, 1964, and the USS Maddox is doing its thing in the Gulf of Tonkin. It's a routine mission, a show of force, a flexing of muscles. But then, out of nowhere, 3 North Vietnamese torpedo boats appear on the horizon. They're coming in hot, and they mean business. The Maddox fires warning shots, the North Vietnamese launch torpedoes, and all hell breaks loose. It's a battle on the high seas, a clash of titans, a fight to the death. When the smoke clears, the North Vietnamese are left with casualties and damaged boats. The US? Not a scratch. The US government is not happy, not one bit. President Johnson goes on national television and tells the American people that aggression by terror will not be tolerated. Congress rallies behind him, the military gears up for action, and the world holds its breath. The message is clear. The US will not be pushed around, not by anyone, not anywhere, not any time. It's a line in the sand, a declaration of intent, a promise of retribution. The incident sends shockwaves through the world. Allies express support, enemies express outrage, and neutrals express concern. It's a game changer, a wake-up call, a turning point. The US increases its military presence in the region. The North Vietnamese dig in their heels, and the stage is set for escalation. The Cold War just got a little hotter, and the world just got a little more dangerous. 2 days later, on August 4th, the Maddox is back in the Gulf, this time joined by its buddy, the USS Turner Joy. They're on high alert, they're on edge, they're ready for anything. And then it happens again. Or does it? The ships claim they're under attack, but this time the details are sketchy, the evidence is thin, the witnesses are confused, the story is inconsistent. Were they really under attack? Or were they just seeing ghosts? Were they telling the truth? Or were they telling tales? Over the years, the whispers turn into shouts. The doubts turn into accusations. The questions turn into investigations. In 2005, an NSA report is declassified and the plot thickens. The report suggests that the second incident might not have even happened. It's a bombshell, a revelation, a damn scandal. The US might have escalated a war based on what? A phantom attack? Radar shadows? A lie? A false flag is a covert operation designed to deceive, to create the appearance of a particular party, group, or nation being responsible for some activity. It's a game of smoke and mirrors, a game of lies and deceit, a game of power and manipulation. From the Reichstag fire in Nazi Germany to Operation Northwoods in the US, false flags have been used throughout history to justify wars, suppress dissent, and consolidate power. They're a tool of the powerful, a weapon of the unscrupulous, a danger to us all. Who's behind these false flags? Who's pulling the strings? Who's playing the game? Governments, intelligence agencies, media moguls. They're the puppet masters, the shadowy figures, the hidden hands. They use false flags to further their agendas, to control the narrative, to shape public opinion. They use them to start wars, to crush enemies, to silence voices. They use them, and they use us. The Gulf of Tonkin incident fits right into this dark and twisted tale. Was it a false flag? Was it a mistake? Was it a lie? Whatever it was used to escalate a war, to rally a nation, to change the course of history. It's a stark reminder of the dangers of deception, the perils of power, the fragility of truth. Wars don't just happen, they're made. They're made by leaders, by decisions, by actions, by reactions. They're made by greed, by fear, by pride, by hate. They're made by escalations, by provocations, by miscalculations. From the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand that sparked World War I to the invasion of Kuwait that ignited the Gulf War, escalations have been the spark that lights the fire, the domino that starts the chain, the snowball that becomes the avalanche. Each of these wars has its own story, its own causes, its own lessons, but they all share a common thread: escalation. A step too far, a line crossed, a point of no return. It's a dance of death, a spiral of violence, a path to destruction. It's the 1960s. The world is changing. People are out in the streets protesting, fighting for their rights. The Vietnam War is tearing the country apart, and the civil rights movement is shaking the very foundations of society. Music is rocking, hair is growing, and the youth are rising. It's a time of revolution, a time of change, and a time of chaos. While all this is going on, something else is happening behind the scenes. Something dark, something secret, something that's going to make you question everything you thought you knew about your own government. Enter Operation Chaos. It's the CIA's covert program to spy on Americans. Not foreigners, not enemies, but their own people. They're tapping phones, they're reading mail, they're infiltrating groups. And why? Because they're scared. They're seeing all these protests, all these movements, and they think it's all being controlled by foreign powers. They think the Russians, the Chinese, someone is pulling the strings, and they're determined to find out who. But here's the thing. They don't find anything. They're breaking laws, they're violating privacy, and they don't find a damn thing. It's a wild goose chase, a waste of time, and a betrayal of trust. So let's set the stage. It's the Cold War. The US and the Soviet Union are locked in this intense battle of ideologies, nuclear arms, and global influence. It's a time of fear, a time of suspicion, and a time of paranoia. People are building bomb shelters, kids are doing duck-and-cover drills in schools, and the world is on the brink of annihilation. And in the midst of all this, the US government is looking inward. They're seeing protests, they're seeing unrest, and they're starting to freak out. They're thinking, who's behind all this? Who's pulling the strings? Is it the Russians? Is it the Chinese? Who's trying to tear us apart from the inside? Now, who's calling the shots here? Who's behind this crazy idea to spy on Americans? Well, it's the top brass at the CIA, people like Richard Helms, the director of the CIA, and James Angleton, the head of counterintelligence. These guys are old-school Cold Warriors, and they're not messing around. They're looking at the world, and they're seeing threats everywhere. They're seeing the rise of communism, the spread of radical ideas, and they're thinking, we've got to do something. We've got to find out who's behind this, and we've got to stop it. So what triggers all this? What pushes them over the edge? Well, it's a series of events. Things like the Cuban Missile Crisis, the assassination of JFK, the rise of radical groups like the Black Panthers and the Weather Underground. It's a world that's changing fast, and they're struggling to keep up. They're seeing all these movements, all these protests, and they're thinking, this can't be happening on its own. Someone must be orchestrating this. Someone must be manipulating the masses. And that fear, that paranoia, it drives them to do something unthinkable. It drives them to turn their eyes inward, to spy on their own people, to break their own laws. So how did they do it? How did they spy on Americans? Well, they were pulling out all the stops. They were tapping phones, listening in on private conversations, recording everything. They were opening mail, reading letters, digging into personal lives. They were infiltrating groups, planting informants, getting inside the movements. And here's the crazy part. They weren't just spying on radicals or criminals. They were spying on ordinary people. They were spying on college students, on activists, on anyone who dared to speak out. It was a full-on assault on privacy, and they didn't care who they hurt in the process. Now, you've got to remember, this is the 1960s. They didn't have the internet, they didn't have smartphones, but they had some cutting-edge tech for the time. They had wiretaps, they had hidden cameras, they had all sorts of gadgets and gizmos. They were using technology in ways that were unheard of, pushing the boundaries, breaking the rules. They were pioneers in the dark arts of espionage, and they were using their skills not against foreign enemies, but against their own people. And here's where it gets really messy. They knew they were breaking the law. They knew they were crossing the line, but they didn't care. They were driven by fear, by paranoia, by a desperate need to find the enemy within. But what about ethics? What about morality? What about the rights of the people they were spying on? Well, those questions were brushed aside, ignored, trampled on. They were so focused on finding the threat, so consumed by their mission, that they lost sight of what was right. So who were they spying on? Who were the targets of Operation Chaos? Well, it's a who's who of the 1960s. They were spying on Martin Luther King Jr., one of the greatest civil rights leaders of all time. They were spying on activists, people fighting for peace, for justice, for equality. They were spying on students, young minds seeking change, seeking a better world. And here's the thing. They weren't just watching. They were actively trying to disrupt, to discredit, to destroy. They were digging into personal lives, looking for dirt, looking for anything they could use to tear these people down. Now, how did they choose their targets? What was the criteria? What was the justification? Well, it's a twisted web. They were looking for anyone who was speaking out, anyone who was challenging the status quo, anyone who was seen as a threat. And it wasn't just about politics, it was about control. It was about silencing voices, stifling dissent, keeping the masses in line. They were using fear, intimidation, manipulation, all in the name of national security, all in the name of protecting the country. And what was the impact? What did it do to the lives, the careers, the dreams of those they spied on? Well, it was devastating. It was a campaign of destruction, a relentless assault on privacy, on reputation, on trust. People were harassed, careers were ruined, families were torn apart. The damage was real, the scars were deep, and the trust was shattered. It was a dark chapter, a chapter that left a mark that still lingers today. What happens when you break the law? What happens when you cross the line? Well, you end up in court. And that's exactly what happened with Operation Chaos. There were legal battles, there were court cases, there were judges and lawyers and all sorts of legal drama. People were suing the government, demanding justice, demanding accountability. They were fighting for their rights, fighting for their privacy, fighting for their dignity. And it was a battle. It was a battle that exposed the dark underbelly of the system, a battle that revealed the cracks in the foundation. But it wasn't just about the law. It was about ethics, about morality, about right and wrong. It was about the big questions, the questions that make you think, the questions that make you question everything. What's more important, security or freedom, privacy or protection, trust or control? These are the questions that were being asked, the questions that were being debated, the questions that were tearing at the very fabric of society. And it wasn't just a debate in the courtroom. It was a debate in the minds, in the hearts, in the souls of the people. It was a debate that forced us to look in the mirror, to confront our values, to confront our fears, to confront ourselves. And what about the legal community? What about the lawyers, the judges, the scholars? Well, they were outraged. They were shocked, they were appalled, they were disgusted. They were looking at the government, at the CIA, at the system, and they were seeing a betrayal of the law, a betrayal of trust, a betrayal of everything they stood for. And they were speaking out, they were writing, they were protesting, they were doing everything they could to shine a light on the darkness. The scandal breaks, the news hits the headlines, and the public is in shock. People are looking at their government, at their leaders, at their institutions, and they're seeing betrayal, they're seeing corruption, they're seeing a system that's gone off the rails. And they're pissed, they're demanding answers, they're demanding justice, they're demanding change, and change is what they get. The CIA is in the hot seat and they're forced to face the music. Heads roll, laws are changed, reforms are implemented, they're put on a tight leash and they're forced to clean up their act. They're reined in, they're held accountable, they're forced to look in the mirror and confront their demons. It's a time of reckoning, a time of reflection, a time of transformation. And it's a time that leaves a mark that still echoes today. One of the most pivotal moments of the civil rights movement was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivering his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech. He's talking about a world where people are judged by their character, not the color of their skin. It's a vision that resonates with people across the nation and around the world. But it's not all speeches and marches. There's real political action happening too. In 1964, we see the passage of the Civil Rights Act, which bans discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. And then, in 1965, we get the Voting Rights Act, which aims to eliminate racial discrimination in voting. These are huge victories, but they don't come easy. There's resistance, there's backlash, and there's a whole lot of struggle. And let's not forget, the 1960s are a tumultuous time. We've got the Vietnam War, the feminist movement, and a whole lot of social upheaval. The civil rights movement is intertwined with all of this, and it's a complex and often messy battle. People are being arrested, attacked, and even killed. But they're not backing down. They're standing strong, and they're pushing forward, knowing that the fight for justice is worth the risk. Born in Atlanta, Georgia in 1929, Dr. King grew up in a world where segregation was just a fact of life. But he had something special, a spark, a sense of purpose. He was a bright kid, and he had a way with words that would later become his trademark. He went on to study theology, and he became a Baptist minister. But he wasn't content to just preach from the pulpit. He saw injustice in the world, and he knew he had to do something about it. Now, remember that Montgomery bus boycott we talked about earlier? Dr. King was right there in the thick of it. He was just 26 years old, but he stepped up and became a leader in that movement. He helped organize the boycott, and he inspired people with his speeches. He talked about nonviolence, about love, about justice, and people listened. They followed him, and they believed in him. But here's the thing about Dr. King. He wasn't just about protests and speeches. He had a philosophy, a guiding principle that was rooted in his Christian faith and the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi. He believed in nonviolent resistance. He believed that you could fight injustice without resorting to violence. He believed in building bridges, not walls. And that philosophy guided everything he did. Throughout the 1960s, Dr. King was at the forefront of the civil rights movement. He led the Birmingham campaign, where he was arrested and wrote his famous Letter from Birmingham Jail. He was there for the Selma to Montgomery marches, where he faced down violence and intimidation. And of course, he was there for the March on Washington, where he delivered his I Have a Dream speech. These were defining moments, not just for Dr. King, but for the entire movement. But with fame and influence came scrutiny. The FBI started to take an interest in Dr. King. They saw him as a potential threat, and they started to watch him. They tapped his phones, they monitored his movements, and they began to build a file on him. So why was the FBI so interested in Dr. King? Well, it all starts with J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI at the time. This guy had a thing about communists, and he saw potential threats everywhere. And Dr. King? He was associating with some folks who were suspected of having communist ties. Plus, he was becoming a major player on the national stage, and that made him a target. But the FBI wasn't just watching Dr. King. They were running this whole program called COINTELPRO, short for Counterintelligence Program. And this thing was designed to monitor and disrupt political dissidents, including civil rights activists. We're talking surveillance, infiltration, disinformation campaigns. This was a full-on effort to undermine anyone who was seen as a threat to the status quo. Now, when it came to Dr. King, the FBI went all in. They got authorization to wiretap his phones, and they started monitoring his communications. And this wasn't just about assessing potential communist influence. This was about digging into his personal life, his relationships, his everything. They were collecting information, building a profile, and looking for ways to discredit him. And the tactics they used? Let's just say they weren't exactly playing by the rules. This was government overreach on a massive scale, and it raises some serious concerns about privacy, freedom, and the abuse of power. But at the time, the FBI saw this as a necessary evil. They saw Dr. King as a potential radical, and they were willing to do whatever it took to keep him in check. It's November 1964, and Dr. King receives this anonymous letter. It's filled with inflammatory language, veiled threats, and insinuations about his personal life. It's accusing him of being a fraud and a degenerate, and it's alluding to alleged extramarital affairs. The letter concludes with a sinister ultimatum, implying that Dr. King should take his own life to avoid public exposure. And it's accompanied by an audio tape containing recordings of private conversations. This isn't just a letter. It's a full-blown psychological assault. The full suicide letter to Martin Luther King said, "In view of your low grade, abnormal personal behavior, I will not dignify your name with either a Mr. or a Reverend or a Doctor. And your last name calls to mind only the type of king such as King Henry VIII and his countless acts of adultery and immoral conduct lower than that of a beast. King, look into your heart. You know you are a complete fraud and a great liability to all us Negroes. White people in this country have enough frauds of their own, but I am sure they don't have one at this time anywhere near your equal. You are no clergyman, and you know it. I repeat, you are a colossal fraud and an evil, vicious one at that. You could not believe in God and act as you do. Clearly you don't believe in any personal moral principles. King, like all frauds, your end is approaching. You could have been our greatest leader. You, even at an early age, have turned out to be not a leader, but a dissolute, abnormal, moral imbecile. We will now have to depend on our older leaders like Wilkins, a man of character, and thank God we have others like him. But you are done. Your honorary degrees, your Nobel Prize, what a grim farce, and other awards will not save you. King, I repeat, you are done. No person can overcome facts, not even a fraud like yourself. Lend your sexually psychotic ear to the enclosure. You will find yourself and in all your dirt, filth, evil, and moronic talk exposed on the record for all time. I repeat, no person can argue successfully against facts. You are finished. You will find on the record for all time your filthy, dirty, evil companions, male and females giving expression with you to your hideous, sick abnormalities. And some of them to pretend to be ministers of the gospel. Satan could not do more. What incredible evilness. It is all there on the record, your sexual orgies. Listen to yourself, you filthy, abnormal animal. You are on the record. You have been on the record. All your adulterous acts, your sexual orgies extending far into the past. This one is but a tiny sample. You will understand this. Yes, from your various evil playmates on the East Coast to Redacted, and others on the West Coast and outside the country, you are on the record. King, you are done. The American public, the church organizations that have been helping, Protestant, Catholic, and Jews will know you for what you are, an evil, abnormal beast. So will others who have backed you. You are done. King, there is only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is. You have just 34 days in which to do. This exact number has been selected for a specific reason. It has definite practical significance. You are done. There is but one way out for you. You better take it before your filthy, abnormal, fraudulent self is bared to the nation. Now, what's the intent behind this letter? It's clear that this is a calculated move, designed to have a profound psychological impact on Dr. King. By attacking his character, threatening to expose personal details, and suggesting suicide as the only way out, the letter is aiming to create fear, anxiety, and self-doubt. The goal is to destabilize Dr. King, to force him into retreat, and to undermine his ability to lead the civil rights movement. It's a deeply personal attack, and it's aimed at breaking his spirit and his resolve. But who sent the letter? It's sent anonymously, with no indication of its origin. But Dr. King quickly recognizes it as an attempt to intimidate him, and he suspects the FBI's involvement. And he's right. The letter is later revealed to be the work of the FBI, specifically William Sullivan, who was the head of the FBI's Domestic Intelligence Division at the time. It's part of a broader effort to undermine Dr. King, and it's a reflection of J. Edgar Hoover's determination to take him down. So how does Dr. King react? He's shocked, he's disturbed, but he's not broken. He recognizes the letter for what it is, and he refuses to bow to the pressure. Despite the disturbing nature of the letter, Dr. King continues his work, refusing to be silenced or deterred by the threats. He's resilient, he's courageous, and he's not about to let this letter stop him. Ever heard of a coup that changed the course of a whole country? Sit tight, because we're diving into Operation Ajax. Let's take a trip back to the early 1950s in Iran. Picture this. A country on the brink of something big, something that's going to shake the world. Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh decides to nationalize the oil industry. Yes, you heard me right. He's taking it back from the British and he's putting it in the hands of the Iranians. The Brits? They're not happy. The Americans? They're watching. And the oil? It's flowing like never before. But this isn't a party, my friends. This is the beginning of a showdown that's going to change everything. In the early 1950s, Iran was sitting on a gold mine. But it wasn't gold, it was oil. Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, a man with vision and courage, decided it was time for Iran to take control of its own resources. He nationalized the oil industry, taking it out of British hands and putting it into the hands of the Iranian people. The British? They were livid. They saw their profits drying up, and they weren't about to let it go without a fight. Economic sanctions were imposed, and the situation escalated into a full-blown crisis. Iran's economy was hit hard, but Mossadegh stood firm. The stage was set and the battle lines were drawn. The US and UK were watching closely, and they didn't like what they saw. A nationalized oil industry in Iran? That was a threat to their interests. They couldn't let it stand. Behind closed doors, in hushed conversations, a plan began to form. A coup. It was drastic, it was dangerous, but they believed it was necessary. The wheels were set in motion, and a dark and secretive operation was underway. This wasn't a game for amateurs. This was a game for the big leagues. The key players were assembled, each with their own role to play. Kermit Roosevelt Jr., a CIA operative with nerves of steel, was the man on the ground. The CIA and MI6, two of the most powerful intelligence agencies in the world, were pulling the strings. And the Shah, Iran's monarch, was caught in the middle, a pawn in a game much larger than himself. These were the players, each with their own agenda, each with their own secrets, each ready to change the course of history. The plan to overthrow Mossadegh was as audacious as it was complex. It wasn't just about removing a leader, it was about reshaping a nation. The CIA and MI6 crafted a strategy that involved political intrigue, espionage, and manipulation. Key figures within Iran were identified and recruited, alliances were forged, and a network of operatives was put into place. The goal was clear: destabilize Mossadegh's government and pave the way for the Shah to take control. It was a high-stakes gamble, and the world was watching. In the shadows, a war of words was being waged. Propaganda was a key weapon in this battle, and no stone was left unturned. Newspapers were bribed to print stories that undermined Mossadegh, false rumors were spread to sow discord, and a campaign of misinformation was unleashed to turn public opinion against the Prime Minister. It was a battle for hearts and minds, and the stakes were nothing less than the future of Iran. The execution of the coup was a tale of triumph and failure, of bold moves and costly mistakes. The first attempt was a disaster. The plotters were discovered, the plan was exposed, and it seemed like the game was up. But the conspirators regrouped, and with determination and cunning, they launched a second try. This time, they succeeded. Through a combination of military maneuvering, political pressure, and sheer audacity, they managed to overthrow Mossadegh and seize control. The aftermath of the coup was a seismic shift in Iran's political landscape. The Shah, once a figurehead, now wielded real power. He embarked on a reign that would last for decades, transforming Iran in ways both profound and controversial. Mossadegh, the man who had dared to challenge the status quo, was arrested, tried, and consigned to house arrest. His legacy, however, lived on, a symbol of a path not taken, a dream not realized. With Mossadegh out of the way, the Shah's reign began in earnest. He embarked on a series of reforms, modernizing the country and aligning it more closely with the West. But not everyone was on board with his vision. Opposition grew, and the Shah's rule became increasingly autocratic. His secret police, the Savak, were notorious for their brutality, and dissent was ruthlessly suppressed. The Shah's reign was a time of transformation, but it was also a time of tension, division, and unrest. The role of the US and UK in the coup was a closely guarded secret, but it couldn't be hidden forever. As details emerged, the true extent of their involvement became clear. They had not just supported the coup, they had orchestrated it. This revelation had far-reaching implications, souring relations with Iran and casting a shadow over their foreign policy. The legacy of Operation Ajax was not just felt in Iran, it resonated around the world. The seeds sown during the coup would eventually bear bitter fruit. In 1979, the Iranian Revolution erupted, and the Shah was overthrown. A new Islamic Republic was established, and Iran's relationship with the West was fundamentally altered. The echoes of Operation Ajax can still be heard today, in the geopolitics of the Middle East, in the debates over intervention and sovereignty, and in the complex and often troubled relationship between Iran and the Western powers. Operation Ajax didn't happen in a vacuum, it was a product of its time. The Cold War was in full swing, and the battle for influence was being waged across the globe. Iran was a key player in this geopolitical chess game, and the coup was a move designed to keep it firmly in the Western camp. The success of the operation sent a message to the world. The US and UK were willing to go to great lengths to protect their interests, even if it meant toppling a democratically elected government. The coup and the subsequent reign of the Shah had a profound impact on the political landscape of the Middle East. The suppression of secular opposition groups created a vacuum that was filled by religious forces. The Iranian Revolution of 1979 was a watershed moment, ushering in a new era of political Islam that would reshape the region. The legacy of Operation Ajax was felt not just in Iran, but across the Muslim world. Operation Mongoose. It's the 1960s. America and the Soviet Union are at each other's throats, eyeballing each other across the globe. The stakes are high and nobody wants to make the wrong move. But Cuba's going red, and that's too close to home for the United States. You've got the Cuban Revolution in 1959 with Fidel Castro coming to power, and he's all cozy with the Soviet Union. So here comes Kennedy, young, ambitious, and he's got something to prove. Bay of Pigs? That was a disaster. He can't let that happen again. So he puts together this group, this brain trust, to come up with Operation Mongoose. The idea? Get Castro out, get a friendly government in. They'll use everything in their arsenal. Sabotage, propaganda, assassination, whatever it takes. They ain't playing games, they're playing for keeps. Now, to understand the special group, you've got to go back to November 1961. Kennedy's in the White House and he wants Castro gone, like yesterday. So, he assembles this team, this fucking Avengers of Cold War politics, to come up with a plan. The special group is born. The members? Oh, they're not just anybody. You've got Robert F. Kennedy, the Attorney General and the President's own brother. He's running the show, overseeing the whole thing. You've got the Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara. He's got the military angle covered. Then there's the CIA director, Alan Dulles. He's the spy master, the puppeteer pulling the strings. And don't forget about the other key players from the State Department, Joint Chiefs of Staff, and others. These guys are the cream of the crop, the best and the brightest, and they're all in on it. They meet in secret, behind closed doors. There's no press, no public, no oversight. It's all hush-hush, and they want to keep it that way. They're plotting, scheming, coming up with ways to take down Castro and his regime. This is serious business, and they're treating it as such. The plans they come up with, they're straight out of a spy novel. They're talking about assassination, sabotage, psychological warfare. They're not playing around, they're playing for keeps. The special group, they're looking at ways to kill Castro. They're talking about poisoned cigars, toxic wetsuits, exploding seashells. They're brainstorming, throwing ideas out there, seeing what sticks. It's like a brainstorming session for murder. But it's not just about killing Castro. They want to make the Cuban government look weak, incompetent. They're planning to sabotage factories, blow up bridges, destroy crops. They're going to hit them where it hurts, make them look like fools. They want to create chaos, spread fear and confusion. Robert Kennedy, he's the man in charge. He's overseeing the whole operation, making sure everything goes according to plan. He's got a vested interest in this, and he's not going to let anything slip through the cracks. The CIA, they're the ones carrying out the dirty work. They're working with the Cuban exiles, hiring assassins, planning sabotage missions. The special group, they're coordinating with the CIA, making sure everything goes smoothly. They're all on the same page, working towards the same goal. But it's not all smooth sailing. There are tensions, disagreements. Not everyone in the special group sees eye to eye. Some want to go harder, push the envelope. Others are more cautious, worried about the risks. It's a balancing act, and it's not easy. So they wanted to get rid of Castro, right? Well, they thought, what's more Cuban than a cigar? So they cooked up this crazy idea to lace Castro's favorite cigars with poison. Sounds like some Batman villain stuff, but they were serious. They even had these cigars made, but they never got close enough to Castro to use them. He was a wily guy, always a step ahead. Castro loved diving. So the CIA thought, hey, let's plant an exploding seashell where he likes to dive. They even found a mollusk to house the explosives. But the plan got scrapped. Why? Because it was too James Bond, even for them. Another attempt linked to his love for diving. They planned to gift him a contaminated diving suit laced with toxins. But Castro's people were on high alert, and the suit never reached him. It's like the guy had a sixth sense for this stuff. This one almost worked. The CIA recruited a waiter at Castro's favorite hangout. The plan was to poison his milkshake. But the damn capsule got stuck in the freezer, and the waiter couldn't get it out. Another failure. It was like a comedy of errors, except the stakes were life and death. They didn't just want to kill Castro, they wanted to undermine his regime. So they dropped leaflets over Cuba, blasting propaganda from hidden radio stations, trying to turn the people against their leader. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. But they kept pushing, kept trying. The US was dead set on crippling Cuba's economy. They were blowing up factories, burning sugarcane fields. They wanted to create chaos, discontentment. If the people were hungry, poor, they'd turn against Castro. That was the thinking anyway. There were plenty of Cubans who hated Castro, and the US was more than happy to help them. They funneled money, weapons, training to these Cuban exiles, hoping they'd stir up trouble, maybe even overthrow the government. It was a risky game, and the stakes were high. This part was more subtle, more insidious. They spread rumors, faked documents, all to make Castro and his regime look weak, corrupt, illegitimate. They even had plans to make it seem like the Second Coming was happening to scare the largely Catholic population. So they try to get rid of Castro, trying to poke the bear that is Cuba. And what happens? You end up poking the big bear, the Soviet Union. They see what's happening and they don't like it one bit. The Soviets are scared, man. The US has missiles in Turkey pointed right at the Soviet Union. They're feeling vulnerable. So what do? They decide to put missiles in Cuba, pointed right back at the US tit for tat, you see? But the US doesn't know about it, not at first. October 1962, the US finds out about the missiles. Shit hits the fan. Kennedy's on the line with the Soviet Premier Khrushchev, and they're going back and forth, trying to figure this thing out without blowing each other up. 13 fucking days. The world's on edge. The US Navy's blockading Cuba. The Soviets are threatening to break through. The nukes are armed and ready. Everyone's holding their breath, praying that someone blinks first. Finally, they figure it out. The US agrees to take its missiles out of Turkey. The Soviets agree to take their missiles out of Cuba. Everybody's saved face, but the world's never been closer to Armageddon. Now, why does this all relate to Operation Mongoose? Because the US poking around in Cuba made the Soviets nervous. It made them feel like they needed to protect their ally, Castro. So they put the missiles there, and the whole thing spiraled from there. Mongoose was supposed to get rid of Castro, remember? Did it work? Hell no. Castro stayed in power for decades, thumbing his nose at the US all the while. You think Cuba was happy about Operation Mongoose? Think again. It put a strain on relations that lasted for decades. Embargoes, travel restrictions, diplomatic freeze-outs. It was a mess. The rest of the world saw what the US was doing too. Assassination plots, sabotage, deception. It made the US look like the bad guy, and it took a long time to shake that image. Was it right for the US to try to overthrow another country's government? Was it legal? Was it moral? Operation Mongoose raised all these questions and more. It made people question what the US government was capable of, and that's a can of worms that's never really been closed. The Teapot Dome Scandal. The name itself conjures images of secrecy, deception, and corruption. This notorious event in American history, taking place in the early 1920s, is more than just a sordid tale of bribery and political greed. It's a story that underscores the delicate balance of power, the fragility of trust in government, and the ongoing struggle for integrity in the political arena. Sit back and brace yourself as we unravel the complex web of the Teapot Dome scandal. The man at the center of it all, Albert B. Fall, had a reputation that preceded him. He was a hardliner, tough on unions and unafraid to play dirty. When President Harding appointed him Secretary of the Interior, people were wary, and rightfully so. His role in the scandal was both mastermind and perpetrator, conniving and cunning, orchestrating the leases of the naval oil reserves and accepting bribes. Oil barons Sinclair and Doheny were no strangers to the high-stakes game of oil politics. They saw an opportunity and seized it, buying their way into a deal that would make them even richer. Their roles in the scandal would reveal the corrosive effect of money on politics and how personal gain could trump ethical considerations. Harding's administration was fraught with scandals and mismanagement. Though Harding himself was never directly implicated in the Teapot Dome scandal, his lack of oversight allowed the corruption to thrive. His death in 1923 would leave many questions unanswered and his legacy tainted. These naval oil reserves were intended for emergencies, but they became the source of intrigue and deception. Fall leased Teapot Dome to Sinclair and the California Reserves to Doheny, all without competitive bidding. The bribes were concealed as loans, and the corruption was set in motion. These were the crown jewels of the government's oil reserves. We're talking about prime locations filled with black gold, Teapot Dome in Wyoming and Elk Hills and Buena Vista in California. These were meant to fuel the Navy in times of emergency, but some folks had other ideas. Albert B. Fall, that slick son of a gun, decided to lease these reserves without any competitive bidding. Who did he lease them to? His pals Harry Sinclair and Edward Doheny. And they didn't just win the leases fair and square, they bought them with cold, hard cash. Sinclair loaned Fall $185,000 for Teapot Dome, and Doheny handed over $100,000 for the California Reserves. These weren't just friendly loans. No, sir, they were bribes, and everyone involved knew it. Rumors started to spread, and people began to ask questions. How did Sinclair and Doheny get those leases? What was Fall's role in all this? Things were getting hot, and the Senate started sniffing around. Senator Thomas J. Walsh takes charge. This guy was a bulldog, relentless and fearless. He led the investigation, digging deep into the dealings and uncovering the corruption. The hearings were explosive, filled with shocking revelations and heated exchanges. People started disappearing, evidence was tampered with, and the guilty parties were doing everything they could to cover their tracks. Fall and Sinclair even hired private detectives to shadow jurors and intimidate witnesses. It was a dirty game, and they were playing to win. The press caught wind of the story, and it was all over the newspapers. The public was outraged, and the pressure was on to get to the bottom of the scandal. Despite their best efforts to hide the truth, Fall, Sinclair, and Doheny couldn't escape justice. The evidence was there, the witnesses came forward, and the jig was up. With the scandal exposed, the legal fight began. Trials, convictions, and acquittals followed. The Teapot Dome scandal was now a full-blown national crisis, and the fallout was just beginning. The trial of Fall was a spectacle, a clash of egos and a fight for justice. Fall was charged with conspiracy and accepting bribes. The evidence was there, the witnesses were ready, and the courtroom was packed. Fall tried to deny the charges. He tried to deflect, but the truth was out. He was found guilty of accepting bribes, and he was sentenced to a year in prison. A year! For orchestrating one of the biggest scandals in U.S. history. But he served his time, a broken and disgraced man. Sinclair wasn't going down without a fight. He was charged with contempt and conspiracy, and he fought every step of the way. He hired detectives, he bullied jurors, and he tried to manipulate the system. His first trial ended in a mistrial thanks to his dirty tactics. But justice wasn't letting him off the hook. His second trial saw him convicted of contempt, and he got off with a slap on the wrist, serving just 6.5 months in prison. Doheny's trial was another high-stakes battle. He was charged with giving bribes, but he played the game well. His lawyers argued, they defended, and they managed to win his acquittal. Doheny walked away a free man, but his reputation was in tatters. The scandal took a toll on President Harding. Though he wasn't directly implicated, his administration was stained by the corruption. People started to question his leadership, his judgment, and his legacy. Harding died in 1923, before the full extent of the scandal was exposed. His death left questions unanswered, but his legacy was forever tarnished. The Teapot Dome scandal was a wake-up call, a siren sounding the alarm for change. People were outraged, and they demanded action. The government responded with new laws and reforms. The Mineral Leasing Act of 1920 was amended, closing loopholes and tightening regulations. Competitive bidding was now required, transparency was enforced, and accountability was strengthened. These reforms were a step towards restoring trust in the government and ensuring that a scandal like Teapot Dome could never happen again. We're stepping back in time to the good old 1930s, when America was knee-deep in the Great Depression. People are losing their jobs left and right. Banks are failing, and the whole damn country's in a tailspin. Who comes riding in on a white horse? Franklin D. Roosevelt, that's who. This son of a gun's got a plan, and he's calling it the New Deal. You see, FDR ain't messing around. He's looking at the country, and he's thinking, we've got to help these folks, and the only way to do it is with big government. He wants social welfare programs, regulations, and he wants them now. He's pushing for Social Security, unemployment benefits, public works projects, you name it. But the businessmen, they're looking at this, and they ain't liking it one bit. Big government means more oversight, more rules, and more of Uncle Sam's fingers in their pies. The banks and industries are thinking, who the heck is this guy, telling us how to run our businesses? But FDR don't care. He's pushing through, helping the common man, trying to lift America out of this depression. He's got a vision, and he's sticking to it. Now let's talk about those fat cats in big business. They're sitting in their plush offices, puffing cigars, looking at these new laws and regulations, and they're getting mad. Taxes are going up, regulations are tightening, and they're feeling the pinch. These industry moguls, the rich and powerful, are starting to plot. They're gathering in the shadows, thinking about how they can push back against this New Deal. Screw these regulations, they're saying. We didn't get rich by playing by the rules. And they're right. They got rich by bending them. So they're pooling their resources, starting to fund politicians who'll fight against FDR's plans. They're running campaigns, spreading propaganda, anything to slow down this train that's barreling through their profits. It's a battle of wills between the president and the titans of industry. It's a struggle for the soul of America, and nobody knows how it's going to end. But wait, there's another angle to this story. While all this is happening in America, something's brewing over in Europe. Fascism's on the rise. Look at Italy, look at Germany. These countries are going down a path, and some people in America are starting to think, hey, maybe that ain't a bad idea. Some of the rich guys, the same ones fighting against the New Deal, are looking across the pond and thinking, maybe we can learn something from these fascists. They're seeing order, control, and a crackdown on those pesky unions and socialists. So they're starting to flirt with the idea. They're talking to each other, thinking about how they can bring some of that European thinking to America. Maybe they can fight against FDR's plans, put a stop to this New Deal once and for all. But it's a dangerous game they're playing. They're tampering with forces they don't fully understand. And there's a chance it could all blow up in their faces. Let's meet the sons of guns behind this whole scheme. General Smedley Butler. Here's a man who's been around the block. A former Marine Corps Major General. This guy's got medals up the wazoo. But he ain't just a soldier. He's got principles, ethics, and a sense of what's right. Gerald McGuire. A bond salesman, a smooth talker, a guy who knows how to make a deal. But don't let that smile fool you. He's got connections to the big money players, and he's knee-deep in this whole plot. Robert Sterling Clark. An heir to the Singer sewing machine fortune, this guy's got money, power, and influence. He's a financier, a man who knows how to pull the strings, and he's got his sights set on the White House. These guys ain't playing around. They're in it to win it, and they've got a plan that'll make your head spin. All right, get this. These guys want to overthrow FDR. Crazy, right? They're sick of the New Deal. They're tired of regulations, and they're thinking, we've got to take control of this ship before it sinks. They've got it all worked out. Step 1, get Butler on board. They need a man on the inside, a man with influence, a man who can rally the troops, and who better than a freaking war hero? Step 2, build a secret army. They're talking veterans, soldiers who know how to fight, who know how to follow orders. They're going to organize them, arm them, and get them ready to march on Washington. Step 3, put a puppet in the White House. They don't just want to stop FDR, they want to control the whole damn country. They're going to find a man they can manipulate, a man who'll do their bidding, and they're going to make him president. It's a plan that's bold, that's daring, and that's downright insane. But they're serious. They're committed, and they think they can pull it off. But here's where things take a turn. Good old Smedley Butler, the man they thought was on their side, he starts to have second thoughts. You see, Butler's a man of principle. He's fought for his country, he's seen the horrors of war, and he knows that what these guys are planning ain't right. It's treacherous, it's dangerous, and it's going to tear the country apart. So he does something nobody expects. He blows the whistle. That's right. He goes to Congress and he spills the beans. He tells them everything, the plan, the players, the whole sordid mess. And Congress? They're stunned. They're shocked. They're thinking, is this for real? Are these guys actually trying to overthrow the government? They launch an investigation. They call in the players, they grill them, they dig deep, and they find out that, yes, this plot is real. It's happening, and it's closer to success than anyone could have imagined. But thanks to Butler, the cat's out of the bag. The plot's exposed, the players are on the run, and the whole thing starts to unravel. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. This story's got twists and turns, intrigue and drama, and it's going to keep you on the edge of your seat. Get ready, because this plot's unfolding, and you ain't seen nothing yet. Enter the McCormick-Dickstein Committee, a group of congressmen who are on the case, and they mean business. They're digging into this plot like a dog with a bone, and they're determined to get to the freaking truth. They're calling in witnesses, they're collecting evidence, and they're building a case. They've got testimonies, documents, and a trail that leads right to the door of those scheming sons of guns. But here's the catch. Is it enough? Sure, they've got evidence, but these guys are smart. They've covered their tracks, they've got alibis, and they've got friends in high places. The committee's fighting an uphill battle. They're trying to expose the truth, but they're facing roadblocks, stonewalling, and a whole lot of pushback. They're not giving up, though. They're pressing on, they're digging deeper, and they're uncovering secrets that'll make your hair stand on end. Now, you'd think a story like this would be all over the freaking newspapers, right? Scandal, intrigue, and attempted coup? That's headline news, and it is, to a point. The newspapers are covering it, the radios are buzzing, and the whole country's talking about the business plot. But here's the kicker. Big business has friends, and those friends have influence. They're calling in favors, they're twisting arms, and they're doing their best to downplay the whole thing. So the coverage is mixed. Some outlets are screaming scandal, others are shrugging it off, and the public's left scratching their heads, wondering what the heck is going on. It's a media circus, a whirlwind of opinions, and a battle for the truth that's being fought not just in the halls of Congress, but on the front pages of the nation's newspapers. So what happened? What's the fallout from this whole sordid affair? Well, that's a question with no easy answer. Some say it was a slap on the wrist, a few stern words, and a whole lot of nothing. Others say it was swept under the rug, buried and forgotten. But the legacy of the business plot? That's something that lingers. It's a story that's become a part of the fabric of our nation, a tale of greed, power, and the lengths some will go to get what they want. It's a reminder that democracy is fragile, that freedom isn't free, and that vigilance is the price we pay to keep our country safe. So you think you've got a handle on all the strange and bewildering events that unfolded during the Cold War? It's time to think again. Today we're taking a plunge into the little-known, highly secretive Operation SHAD. Prepare yourselves for a top-secret mission that's so wild, you'll hardly believe it ever took place. Operation SHAD, or Shipboard Hazard and Defense, was a part of the United States Department of Defense's Deseret Test Center project. Initiated in the 1960s, this series of tests was designed to understand the effects of biological and chemical agents on humans. Using real Navy ships, the government tested various agents to determine how they spread and how to protect against them. It sounds like something out of a spy novel, doesn't it? But it was very real and had serious implications. Now that you've got a taste of what Operation SHAD was all about, you're probably wondering what makes it so extraordinary. Well, you're in for a ride, as we're about to delve into the depths of secrecy, scandal, and a treasure trove of eyebrow-raising revelations. Hold tight, because this journey will take us into uncharted territories, unearthing information that might just turn everything you thought you knew about the Cold War on its head. You ready? Let's get started. Imagine a world on edge, where the threat of nuclear annihilation looms like a dark shadow over the globe. The United States and the Soviet Union, two superpowers locked in a deadly embrace, are playing a dangerous game of chess where the stakes are the very existence of humankind. It's a time of espionage, mistrust, and fear. It's a time when secrets are guarded jealously, and information is a weapon that can win or lose wars. In this tense atmosphere, the U.S. government decided to embark on an experiment so audacious that it defies belief. The Cold War was an ideological and political battle that saw the world split into two opposing camps. The race to build bigger and better weaponry, the relentless pursuit of technological advantage, and the shadowy world of intelligence gathering defined this period. It was against this backdrop that Operation SHAD was born. Ever wondered how your troops might stand up against the terrifying prospect of chemical or biological warfare? How would they cope? What equipment would they need? How could you keep them safe? These were the questions that plagued military planners during the Cold War, and they needed answers. The purpose of Operation SHAD was clear: to find out how U.S. forces would fare against these unconventional and horrifying weapons. Operation SHAD was not just a theoretical exercise. It involved real people, real ships, real chemicals, and real risks. Tests were carried out to determine how various agents would behave under different conditions, how they would spread, and how best to protect against them. It was a bold and sometimes ruthless quest for knowledge, driven by the pressing need to understand a new and frightening form of warfare. Now, let's talk about the unwitting participants who had no idea what they were getting themselves into. The scientists. These were the brains behind the operation, the men and women tasked with designing and executing the tests. They were drawn from various fields, including biology, chemistry, and medicine. To them, Operation SHAD was a scientific challenge, an opportunity to push the boundaries of knowledge. The government officials. These were the decision makers, the individuals who gave the green light to Operation SHAD. They included top military brass, intelligence officers, and politicians. Driven by the need to protect the nation and gain an edge over the Soviet Union, they were willing to sanction an experiment of unprecedented scale and risk. The soldiers. Last but not least, we must remember the soldiers, the men who were on those ships, who breathed in those chemicals, who followed orders without question. They were the human element in an otherwise cold and calculated process. Many of them were kept in the dark, unaware of the true nature of the tests they were part of. How does one go about conducting a series of highly secretive and incredibly risky experiments on biological and chemical warfare? Well, it all starts with a plan, and this plan was as intricate as it was audacious. The setup for Operation SHAD required extensive preparation. Ships were specially outfitted with spraying devices. Planes were modified, and certain areas were selected for testing. Highly trained scientists and technicians were brought in to manage the operations, and detailed protocols were developed to ensure everything went according to plan. Now this is where things really start to get interesting. Picture this: massive Navy ships sailing on the open ocean, planes flying overhead, all involved in a carefully choreographed dance. And what are they spraying? Substances that would make your skin crawl, chemicals that were as fascinating to the scientists as they were terrifying to those who knew their true nature. These experiments involved the release of various biological and chemical agents, both on land and at sea. Substances such as VX nerve gas, sarin, and other toxins were sprayed in different weather conditions to understand how they would behave. They studied how these agents would disperse, how long they would linger, and what protective measures might work against them. Now that the experiments were over, what happened to those who got exposed? Did they just go back to their normal lives, none the wiser? Unfortunately, this is where our story takes a dark and tragic turn. Many of those involved in Operation SHAD began to experience health problems shortly after the experiments. Respiratory issues, skin problems, neurological disorders, the list of ailments was long and alarming. For some, these health problems persisted, turning into chronic conditions that lasted a lifetime. And for others, the legacy of Operation SHAD was even more sinister, leading to premature death. But surely the government would step in, take responsibility, and make things right. If that's what you were expecting, then prepare for a shock, because what followed was a web of denials, obfuscations, and outright lies. The government's response to the fallout from Operation SHAD was to deny and suppress. Records were classified, documents were hidden, and those who dared to ask questions were met with silence or misleading answers. It was a cover-up on an epic scale, designed to keep the true nature of the experiments hidden from the public and even from those who were directly affected. See veterans fight for recognition. But the story doesn't end there. Far from it. The men who were subjected to these experiments weren't about to be silenced. They knew something had happened to them, something that wasn't right, and they were determined to find out what it was. And so began a long and arduous battle for answers and justice. The veterans of Operation SHAD, along with their families and advocates, embarked on a campaign to uncover the truth. They demanded access to records, sought medical help, and lobbied for official recognition of what had been done to them. It was a struggle that would last for decades, filled with setbacks, disappointments, and small victories. Eventually, their persistence paid off. Slowly but surely, the truth began to emerge, and the government was forced to acknowledge its role in the experiments. Compensation was offered to some, and an official apology was made, but for many, it was too little, too late. So here we are in the 1950s, basking in the sunshine of Puerto Rico, a place known for its vibrant culture and stunning scenery. But lurking beneath this picturesque facade, something insidious was brewing, something that would change the lives of countless Puerto Ricans forever. Pharmaceutical giants, they're the big players, the monolithic companies controlling the meds that millions take every day. In the 1950s, these companies were just starting to stretch their long, greedy fingers across the globe, seeking new markets, new opportunities, and unfortunately, new guinea pigs for their experimentation. In Puerto Rico, they saw a golden opportunity, a U.S. territory with a labor force, lax regulations, and best of all, a population unaware of what was about to befall them. You see, ethics in the 1950s? That's some funny shit right there. Pharmaceutical companies viewed this beautiful island not as a place to be revered, but as a playground for their twisted games. With a green light from Uncle Sam and local authorities turning a blind eye, these corporations descended upon Puerto Rico like vultures, eager to test their new drugs and treatments. It was the wild fucking west of the medical world, a free-for-all where companies could conduct trials with little to no oversight. Can you imagine being a young mother, thinking you're getting top-notch healthcare, only to find out you're part of some sick experiment, and the doctors, the very people sworn to protect and heal, they were in on it too. They were paid handsomely for their betrayal. Money talks, and in this case, it screamed. Women were given birth control pills with hormone levels through the fucking roof. Children were tested with experimental vaccines. The elderly were used to try out untested medications. It was a feeding frenzy, and the people of Puerto Rico were the main course. You'd think that somewhere along the line someone would stand up and say, "Hey, this shit ain't right." But no, the money kept flowing, the experiments kept happening, and the people of Puerto Rico continued to suffer. Birth defects, medical complications, untold pain and suffering, all in the name of progress and science. And the corporations? They were raking in the profits with no one to answer to. But you can only push people so far before they start pushing back. And that's exactly what happened in Puerto Rico. Activists, journalists, and some brave politicians started to dig. And what they uncovered was a scandal so massive, so disgusting, it shook the island to its core. Lawsuits were filed, protests erupted, and the world began to see the ugly truth behind the pharmaceutical giant's facade. People were angry, and they were ready to fight. And fight they did. The road to justice was a long and fucking arduous one. Big Pharma didn't just roll over, they fought back with everything they had. But the people of Puerto Rico were resilient, determined, and they were on the right side of history. Trials, investigations, settlements, and new regulations slowly but surely started to turn the tide. The corporations were held accountable, but the scars remained. Puerto Rico's encounter with the pharmaceutical giants left a mark that still resonates today. New regulations were put in place, and awareness grew, but the memories of those dark times linger. Operation Popeye. The name alone raises questions, doesn't it? It might sound whimsical, like something out of a cartoon, but trust me, it was anything but. The Vietnam War was a time of innovation, desperation, and a willingness to explore any avenue to gain the upper hand. So what was Operation Popeye? Well, let's delve into the facts. The U.S. military, always looking for the next big thing, stumbled upon the concept of weather manipulation. Imagine controlling the rain, the wind, the storms, turning them into weapons. Imagine turning the weather itself against your enemy. That's exactly what they tried to do. You know how annoying it can be when you plan a picnic and it rains? Well, think about planning a military operation and having the weather ruin everything. Now imagine if you could control that weather. That's where Operation Popeye comes in. The operation aimed to increase rainfall along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, a vital supply route for the Viet Cong. The idea was to turn the trail into a muddy, impassable mess. And guess what? They actually pulled it off. Now don't go thinking this was some sort of magical spell or some alien technology. No, this was real science, albeit on the cutting edge. Cloud seeding, as it's known, was the method used. Planes would fly over the trail, dropping silver iodide into the clouds, which would in turn cause rain. More rain than usual, I should add. This wasn't just a shower, this was a monsoon. The idea of manipulating weather for warfare didn't just pop out of nowhere. It had roots in World War II when scientists began experimenting with cloud seeding techniques. But it was the Vietnam War, with its complex terrain and challenging weather, that made the U.S. military revisit the idea in earnest. In the early 1960s, weather modification was not entirely new. Scientists had already been experimenting with cloud seeding for agricultural purposes, but using it for warfare, that was a revolutionary idea. Early trials were conducted with mixed results, but enough promise was shown to merit further exploration. Operation Popeye was not some rogue operation conducted by a few ambitious soldiers. It had the backing of the U.S. government, funding from various departments, and support from top military officials. It was a well-orchestrated, carefully planned initiative that aimed to tip the balance of power in the Vietnam War. The individuals chosen for this mission were not just pilots. They were scientists, meteorologists, and seasoned military personnel. They were trained extensively, learning not just about cloud seeding, but about the ethics, logistics, and possible repercussions of weather manipulation. The first real-world tests of Operation Popeye were conducted in secrecy. Planes equipped with cloud seeding technology would fly over specific areas, releasing their payloads into the clouds. Initially, success was mixed, but over time the methods were refined and the results became more consistent. Operation Popeye didn't just randomly seed clouds anywhere. Specific targets were chosen, primarily along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The idea was to create torrential rain and flood the supply routes, slowing down the movement of the Viet Cong. Cloud seeding involves introducing particles like silver iodide into clouds. These particles act as nuclei around which water droplets can condense, leading to increased rainfall. It sounds simple, but it was a complex, delicate process that required a deep understanding of meteorology. Special planes were designed for Operation Popeye, equipped with cloud seeding technology. These planes could release carefully measured amounts of silver iodide at precise altitudes, ensuring the desired effect. The operation wasn't just about making it rain, it was about understanding the effects. Extensive monitoring and analysis were conducted to understand how the additional rainfall was impacting the ground, the enemy movements, and even the local ecology. The fallout from Operation Popeye was significant. It led to international agreements banning the use of weather manipulation in warfare. It also sparked debates that continue to this day about the boundaries of science, technology, and military tactics. In the darkest corners of World War II, a plot was taking shape. A conspiracy so audacious, so daring, that it would challenge everything we thought we knew about the war. This was Operation Valkyrie, a secret plan to assassinate none other than Adolf Hitler himself. But was there more to this story than meets the eye? Was it merely a failed attempt, or was there a hidden truth, a conspiracy that ended up being real? Picture this. Germany, 1944. The war is raging, and discontent is growing within the ranks of the German military. Officers and soldiers alike are beginning to question the Führer's leadership, his decisions, his very sanity. Among them, a group of high-ranking officials is plotting, meeting in secret, whispering in hushed tones about a plan to take matters into their own hands. But what was Operation Valkyrie? Was it just a desperate attempt by a few disillusioned officers? Or was it something more? Something deeper? Something that went beyond the mere assassination of a dictator? The rumors were there. The whispers, the hidden documents, the mysterious deaths. Could it be that there was a conspiracy at play, a plot that went all the way to the top? As we delve into the shadows of history, we'll uncover the secrets of Operation Valkyrie, the men behind it, the plan they devised, and the conspiracy theory that surrounded it. We'll explore the evidence, the hidden truths, and the shocking revelation that this conspiracy theory ended up being true. Germany, 1944. The world is engulfed in the chaos of World War II. The air is thick with tension, the streets filled with the sounds of marching boots, the distant rumble of tanks, and the ever-present fear of the unknown. The Nazi regime is at its height, its grip on Europe seemingly unbreakable. But beneath the surface, cracks are beginning to show. In the heart of Berlin, behind closed doors and guarded secrets, a group of high-ranking German officers is growing restless. They've seen the madness of their leader, the destruction he's wrought, the lives he's ruined. They've seen the tide of the war turning, and they know that something must be done. These men are not rebels or traitors in the traditional sense. They are patriots, loyal to their country, but not to the man who leads it. They've witnessed the horrors of the Eastern Front, the atrocities committed in the name of the Reich, and they've had enough. In dimly lit rooms filled with the scent of cigars and the clinking of glasses, they meet in secret. They talk of a new Germany, a Germany free from the tyranny of Hitler, a Germany that can find its place in the world once more. They talk of a plan, a daring and dangerous plan, a plan that could change the course of history. This plan is Operation Valkyrie, a plot to assassinate the Führer and seize control of the government. It's a plan filled with risks, with uncertainties, with the very real possibility of failure. But it's a plan they believe in, a plan they're willing to die for. As the days turn into weeks, the plot takes shape. More officers are brought into the fold, each one carefully chosen, each one sworn to secrecy. They know the stakes, they know the risks, and they know that failure is not an option. But what they don't know is that they're not alone. Others are watching, others are listening, others who see the same truths, the same dangers, the same need for action. The conspiracy is growing, the web of intrigue is spreading, and the stage is set for one of the most audacious and dramatic events of the war. Operation Valkyrie is more than just a plot, more than just a plan. It's a symbol of hope, a beacon of resistance, a testament to the courage and conviction of those who dared to stand up and say enough. It's a story that transcends time and place, a story that resonates with all who believe in justice, in freedom, in the power of the human spirit to rise above adversity and make a difference. So here we are, on the brink of something extraordinary, something that could change the course of history. The pieces are in place, the players are ready, and the game is about to begin. Welcome to Operation Valkyrie, a tale of conspiracy, courage, and a truth so incredible it could only be real. The plot, the very essence of Operation Valkyrie, was a thing of audacity, of desperation, and of sheer brilliance. It was born from the minds of men who had seen too much, who had suffered too much, and who knew that something had to change. In the shadows of the German High Command, a group of officers began to gather. Men like Klaus von Stauffenberg, a charismatic and determined colonel, Ludwig Beck, a retired general with a mind for strategy, and Henning von Tresckow, a major general with a burning sense of justice. These were men of honor, men of courage, men who were willing to risk everything for the sake of their country. The plan was simple in its conception, but complex in its execution. The original Valkyrie plan was a contingency operation designed to maintain order in the event of a breakdown in government control. But these men saw something more in it, something that could be twisted, something that could be turned into a weapon against the very regime they served. They would use Valkyrie to assassinate Hitler, to take control of key government buildings, to seize the reins of power. They would use it to bring down the Nazi regime from within, to pave the way for a new Germany, a Germany that could heal, that could rebuild, that could find its place in the world once more. But such a plan was not without its risks. Secrecy was paramount, trust was scarce, and the margin for error was razor thin. Every move had to be calculated, every decision weighed, every step taken with the utmost care. One wrong move, one slip of the tongue, one moment of doubt, and the whole thing could come crashing down. As the weeks turned into months, the plot began to take shape. Meetings were held in secret, messages passed in code, documents forged, and alliances formed. The conspirators knew that they were walking a tightrope, that they were playing a dangerous game, but they also knew that the stakes were too high to back down. They recruited others into their fold, men and women who shared their vision, who understood the urgency of their mission. They trained, they planned, they prepared, knowing that the clock was ticking, knowing that time was not on their side, and all the while the shadow of the Gestapo loomed large. The secret police were everywhere, their eyes and ears always open, always watching. The conspirators knew that they were being hunted, that their every move was being scrutinized, that the noose was tightening. But they also knew that they had no choice, that they had to press on, that they had to succeed. For this was more than just a plot to kill a dictator. This was a battle for the soul of a nation, a fight for justice, for freedom, for the very essence of what it means to be human. This was a moment in history, a turning point, a chance to make a difference. Operation Valkyrie was a gamble, a roll of the dice, a leap into the unknown. It was a testament to the power of conviction, to the resilience of the human spirit, to the belief that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. The stage was set, the players were ready, and the world was watching. The time had come to act, to take a stand, to make a choice. The time had come for Operation Valkyrie, a story of intrigue, of courage, of a conspiracy that ended up being true. And so, with hearts pounding and minds focused, the conspirators moved forward, each step taking them closer to their goal, each moment bringing them nearer to their destiny. The plot was in motion, the game was afoot, and the world would never be the same again. But what if I told you that there was more to Operation Valkyrie than just a plot to assassinate Hitler? What if I told you that there was a conspiracy theory, a hidden layer of intrigue that went deeper, that reached further, that touched the very core of the Nazi regime? The rumors started almost as soon as the plot was uncovered. Whispers in the dark, hints of something more, something that went beyond the mere assassination of a dictator. People began to talk, to question, to wonder. Was there more to Operation Valkyrie than met the eye? Was there a hidden agenda, a secret plan, a conspiracy that went all the way to the top? The evidence was there if you knew where to look. Hidden documents, coded messages, mysterious deaths, unexplained events. The pieces of the puzzle were scattered, but they were there, waiting to be put together, waiting to reveal a truth that was stranger, that was darker, that was more incredible than anyone could have imagined. The conspiracy theory took shape, fueled by the doubts, by the questions, by the need to know. Researchers, historians, investigators, they all delved into the mystery, digging deeper, peeling back the layers, uncovering the secrets that lay beneath. They found connections, links that tied the conspirators to the highest levels of the Nazi regime, to the inner circle of Hitler's trusted advisors, to the very heart of the Third Reich. They found evidence of a plan within a plan, a plot within a plot, a conspiracy that went beyond Valkyrie, that went beyond the war, that went beyond anything anyone had ever seen before. And as they dug deeper, as they unraveled the threads, as they followed the trail, they began to see the truth. The conspiracy theory was real, the evidence was there, the connections were clear. Welcome to the twisted tale of the Lavon Affair, a story so wild, so unbelievable you'd swear it was ripped straight from the pages of a spy novel. But oh no, this ain't fiction, this is as real as the air you're breathing. Back in the 1950s, the world was a different place. The Cold War was heating up, tensions were high, and in the Middle East, the pot was about to boil over. Enter Israel, a young nation with enemies at every turn, looking to secure its place in a hostile world. And Egypt, a land of ancient wonders, caught in the crossfire of superpowers, playing a dangerous game of cat and mouse. Now, what if I told you that Israel hatched a plan so daring, so audacious, that it would make James Bond blush? A plan to plant bombs in Egypt, to create chaos, to turn allies against each other, all in the name of self-preservation. Sounds crazy, right? Sounds like the ramblings of a conspiracy nut, someone who's watched one too many spy movies. But hold on to your hat, because this ain't no conspiracy theory. This is the Lavon Affair, a covert operation that went so wrong it's become a legend, a cautionary tale, a story that'll make you question everything you thought you knew. So sit back, grab a drink, and get ready to dive into a world of espionage, betrayal, and political intrigue. We're about to unravel the web of the Lavon Affair, a conspiracy theory that turned out to be true. And by the time we're done, you'll be left wondering, what else don't I know? What other secrets are hidden in the shadows? What other truths are waiting to be uncovered? Welcome to the Lavon Affair. Trust me, you're in for a wild ride. All right, let's set the stage. Because to understand the Lavon Affair, you've got to know the world it was born in. Picture Egypt in the 1950s, a land caught between ancient history and modern turmoil. The pyramids are standing tall, but beneath them, the ground is shaking. The British are pulling out, the Americans are moving in, and the Soviets are lurking in the shadows. It's a chessboard, and the pieces are in motion. Now, who's playing this game? On one side, you've got Israel, a young nation barely on its feet, surrounded by enemies, looking over its shoulder, wondering who's coming for them next. They're the new kid on the block, and they've got something to prove. On the other side, you've got Egypt, led by Gamal Abdel Nasser, a man with a vision, a man with a plan, a man who's playing both sides of the Cold War like a fiddle. But it ain't just about Egypt and Israel. Oh no, this is bigger. This is about the whole damn Middle East. The British, the French, the Americans, the Soviets, they're all there, they're all watching, they're all waiting to see who blinks first. It's a powder keg, and the fuse is lit. Now let's talk about the players, the people who are about to step into this storm. You've got Israeli Defense Minister Pinhas Lavon, a man with a mission, a man who's willing to do whatever it takes to protect his country. You've got Egyptian Jews, caught in the middle, torn between two worlds, ready to risk it all for a cause they believe in. You've got spies, double agents, politicians, and soldiers all dancing on a tightrope, all playing a game with stakes higher than you can imagine. What's at stake, you ask? Everything. Israel's survival, Egypt's reputation, the balance of power in the Middle East, the trust between allies, the very fabric of international relations. This ain't just about planting a few bombs. This is about sending a message, about drawing a line in the sand, about showing the world who's boss. So here we are, on the brink of something big, something dangerous, something that's about to change the course of history. The stage is set, the players are in place, and the game is about to begin. Welcome to the Lavon Affair. Trust me, you ain't seen nothing yet. Now that you've got the lay of the land, let's dive into the plot, the meat and bones of this wild tale. This is where things get real, where the line between right and wrong gets so blurred, you won't know who to root for. So here's the plan. A plan so audacious, so daring. It's got to be a work of fiction, right? Wrong. This is Operation Susanna, a covert mission hatched by the Israeli government to plant bombs in Egyptian, American, and British-owned targets. Why? To create chaos, to turn allies against each other, to make Egypt look bad, to make Israel look strong. It's a game of shadows, a game of deception, a game where the rules are made to be broken. Now, let's talk about the execution, the nuts and bolts of this operation. Israeli agents recruit Egyptian Jews, train them in espionage, arm them with explosives, and send them into the heart of Cairo and Alexandria. They're on a mission A mission to strike fear, to sow discord, to light a fire that'll burn across the Middle East. But here's the thing that turns this story from a thriller into a tragedy. Mistakes are made. The agents are sloppy, the bombs are faulty, the plan starts to unravel. One bomb goes off too soon, another fails to detonate, and the Egyptian authorities are on their tail. The net is closing, the walls are closing in, and the agents are caught, one by one, like fish in a barrel. Now comes the arrests, the trials, the interrogations. The Egyptian authorities are out for blood, and they're not holding back. The agents are tortured, forced to confess, paraded in front of the world like criminals, like traitors, like pawns in a game they never fully understood. The trials are a spectacle, a show of force, a message to the world that Egypt won't be played, won't be fooled, won't be pushed around. But the fallout is where this story takes a turn, where the plot thickens, where the stakes get even higher. The international community is outraged. The Israeli government is in denial. The Egyptian government is on the warpath. Accusations are flying, fingers are pointing, and the truth is buried beneath a mountain of lies, deceit, and political maneuvering. And all the while, the world is watching, waiting, wondering what's really going on, what's really at stake, what's really the truth. The Lavon Affair is no longer a covert operation. It's a public relations nightmare, a diplomatic crisis, a stain on the reputation of nations. So you think you've got the story figured out, huh? You think you know who's right, who's wrong, who's telling the truth, who's lying? Well, think again. Because now we're diving into the murky waters of conspiracy, where nothing is as it seems, where the truth is a moving target, where the line between fact and fiction is so thin, you could cut it with a knife. Let's start with the denial, the big, fat, bold-faced lie that Israel had nothing to do with the Lavon Affair. Oh no, they said, we would never do such a thing. We would never stoop so low. We would never betray our allies, our friends, our principles. But the world wasn't buying it. The evidence was piling up. The whispers were growing louder, and the conspiracy theorists were having a field day. You see, the Lavon Affair wasn't just a failed covert operation. It was a Pandora's box, a can of worms, a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. The more people dug, the more they found, the more they questioned, the more they doubted. Internal investigations were launched, leaked documents were published, whistleblowers came forward, and the conspiracy theory was born. But what was the conspiracy, you ask? What was the big secret, the hidden agenda, the master plan? Some said it was a plot to overthrow Nasser, to destabilize Egypt, to redraw the map of the Middle East. Others said it was a false flag operation, a way to turn the world against Egypt, to turn allies into enemies, to turn friends into foes. And still, others said it was a cover-up, a diversion, a smokescreen to hide something even bigger, even darker, even more sinister. And the public ate it up. They couldn't get enough. They couldn't look away. They couldn't stop asking questions, demanding answers, seeking the truth. The Lavon Affair was no longer a historical footnote. It was a cultural phenomenon, a political firestorm, a conspiracy theory that had taken on a life of its own. The conspiracy theory was true. That's right. The rumors, the whispers, the doubts, they were all true. Israel had planned the operation, had recruited the agents, had planted the bombs, had lied to the world. The conspiracy theorists were right. The skeptics were vindicated. The truth was out, and the world was left to pick up the pieces. So, what does this all mean? What does this teach us? What does this say about the world we live in, the governments we trust, the leaders we follow? The Lavon Affair is a cautionary tale, a warning, a lesson in humility, in skepticism, in the power of doubt. It's a story that reminds us that sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, that sometimes the conspiracy theorists are right, that sometimes the world is not what it seems. The moment when the masks come off, the secrets are revealed, and the world is forced to face the cold, hard reality of the Lavon Affair. Let's start with the admission, the moment when Israel finally comes clean, finally admits to the world that yes, they planned the operation, yes, they recruited the agents, yes, they planted the bombs, yes, they lied to the world. It's a bombshell, a shockwave, a seismic shift that sends ripples across the globe. The conspiracy theorists are vindicated, the skeptics are silenced, the world is left to grapple with the truth. But the admission is just the beginning, just the tip of the iceberg, just the first domino to fall. Next come the resignations, the political fallout, the heads that roll, the careers that end, the reputations that are shattered. Israeli Defense Minister Pinhas Lavon is forced to resign, others follow suit. And the Israeli government is left to pick up the pieces, to rebuild trust, to regain credibility, to move forward in a world that's forever changed. And then there's the legacy, the lasting impact, the scars that remain, the lessons that are learned, the changes that are made. The Lavon Affair becomes a symbol, a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of deception, the perils of power, the fragility of trust. It's a story that's taught in schools, debated in universities, analyzed in think tanks, discussed in government halls. It's a story that changes the way nations operate, the way leaders lead, the way people think. You think you know the world of espionage? Think again. The Cold War, a time of tension, a time of fear, a time of cats. That's right, my friends, cats. Those furry little creatures that purr on your lap, that play with a ball of yarn, that stare into your soul with those enigmatic eyes. But what if I told you that once upon a time, these seemingly innocent creatures were recruited into the shadowy world of spies and intelligence? Imagine, if you will, a room filled with the brightest minds of the CIA brainstorming, desperate to gain an edge over the enemy. And then a spark, an idea so outlandish, so bizarre, yet so brilliant that it just might work. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Operation Acoustic Kitty. Yes, you heard that right. Operation Acoustic Kitty. A top-secret project that aimed to turn ordinary house cats into sophisticated spying machines. A project that took 5 years to complete. A project that cost up to $20 million. A project that, well, you'll have to wait and see. The Cold War. A time when the world was on the brink. A time when every move, every decision, every secret could tip the balance of power. The United States and the Soviet Union, two superpowers locked in an ideological battle, a battle fought not just with weapons, but with intelligence, with information, with spies. In this world of shadows and secrets, the CIA was desperate for an edge, desperate for a way to listen in on the enemy, to gather intelligence that could make or break the struggle. And in this desperation, an idea was born, an idea so outlandish, so bizarre, yet so tantalizing that it just had to be explored. Imagine a cat, an ordinary house cat, but not just any cat. A cat equipped with the latest technology, a cat that could go where no human could go, a cat that could listen in on the most private conversations without raising suspicion. This was the idea behind Operation Acoustic Kitty. The plan was complex. The CIA's engineers developed a way to implant a microphone into the cat's ear, a transmitter at the base of its skull, and a thin wire into its fur leading to the tail. But creating a high-tech cat was no small task in an era of reel-to-reel audio recording and room-sized computers. The challenges were many. How do you make a cat look like a normal cat with no weird protrusions or suspicious scars? How do you address the cat's hunger issues? How do you control a cat to, well, to be a spy? The process was rigorous. It was demanding. It was a remarkable scientific achievement. And then came the mission. The target? A park in Washington, D.C., a place where diplomats, politicians, and spies often met. A place where secrets were whispered, deals were made. A place where a cat could blend in, could listen, could spy. The mission was clear. Gather intelligence and return. Simple, right? But as anyone who's ever tried to herd cats will tell you, nothing with cats is ever simple. The cat was released, the microphone was activated, the CIA's agents were listening, waiting, hoping. But on that first trip out, the cat was hit and killed by a taxi while crossing the road. It never even made it to the target. The mission was a failure. The intelligence was lost. The operation was over. The CIA was devastated. The years of preparation, the millions of dollars, the hopes, the dreams, all gone in an instant, all lost to the whims of a cat. The aftermath was swift. The operation was scrapped. The idea, once so promising, once so tantalizing, was now a joke, a footnote in the history of espionage, a story to be told with a shake of the head and a wry smile. The story of Operation Acoustic Kitty, a tale of ambition, innovation, failure, and wisdom, could have ended there, a mere footnote in the annals of espionage. But like all great stories, it had a life of its own, a life that continued to resonate, to inspire, to teach. For years, the tale was whispered in the corridors of power, chuckled over in the bars of Washington, D.C., shared with a wink and a nod among those in the know. It became a legend, a myth, a conspiracy theory. Was it true? Could it be true? Or was it just another tall tale, another wild yarn spun by those with too much time on their hands? But then, something incredible happened. The documents were declassified, the truth was revealed, the legend became reality. Operation Acoustic Kitty was real, the cat was real, the mission was real. The world was stunned, the media was abuzz, the public was fascinated. The legacy of Operation Acoustic Kitty lives on, not just in the history books, not just in the archives of the CIA, but in the hearts and minds of those who hear its tale. It has become a symbol, a metaphor, a parable. It has become a part of our culture, our folklore, our collective consciousness. All right, folks, we've reached the end of this incredible journey through history's hidden corridors. You've just been taken through tales that were once dismissed as mere conspiracy theories, only to be revealed as shocking realities. These stories serve as a stark reminder that we must never be too quick to dismiss things as mere fabrications. There are some unsettling events unfolding right before our eyes, and the responsibility to educate ourselves falls squarely on our shoulders. History has a way of repeating itself, and we must be vigilant to recognize the patterns. As you move forward, keep an open mind, question what you hear, and never stop seeking the truth. The world is filled with mysteries, and sometimes the answers are more astounding than we could ever imagine. If you found this journey enlightening, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to comment below with the story that interested you the most. Your engagement helps us continue to uncover the hidden truths of our world. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the unknown. Stay curious, stay informed, and never stop questioning. Until next time, keep learning and keep growing.